Does he have it?
Medeiros is going to get it.
Oh, they're going to toss it. They haven't got it.
He's on the outside line though, going into the fastest corner on the circuit. Surely this can't work.
Dominic Ligner has got a sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's caught back into play. Exactly, Miller's still such up. He's not on second and change. All of a sudden, Miller's back in play.
Can Barry do it? Big Barry's going to do it. Big Barry.
Greetings one and all, it is the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. We're back in action once again here at the Champion Motorsports. We are going to have a very exciting battle, and where, of course, we're going to have a great race at Longbeach, California. This is one of the toughest race circuits on the planet for GT cars and for hypercars as well. It's going to be all about consistency, discipline, and great racecraft. This is one of those circuits that really bites for the underprepared. And certainly Longbeach is going to give us plenty of excitement and drama from the outset. Great to be with you once again, folks. I'm Jake Sanson. With me in the booth is Stephen Carabelis and Alec King. We're going to have some really exciting banter over the course of the 60 minutes of the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. It's Hypercars from 2023 tonight. So we're going to have all of the latest tech, all of the latest great-looking cars, and some very motivated and excited drivers who want to win. Here is the schedule for the 2023 season. For those who have not been following right from the start, we obviously have Longbeach tonight for 60 minutes of the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. Then, of course, we go to Spa 2 weeks from now. And then we have Le Mans on the 1st of June. For the 2.4 hours on the Thursday night and the 4.8 hours on the Virtual World Sports Car Championship Saturday. It's going to be a really exciting one, that. Watkins Glen, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, Monza and Road America, continuous through the summer. Then in the autumn, we head to Fuji in Japan, Indianapolis in the United States, Road Atlanta, and then Bahrain will finish us off. It's going to be a very busy season, and what a sensational battle it's going to be. Here's the circuit we're racing on tonight. And it is, of course, the very stereotypical 1.97 mile circuit, first used for the Grand Prix of Long Beach all the way back in 1976. And a fabulous race circuit with plenty of fast straights, very tight and twisty apexes, and being a street circuit, lots of bumps and opportunities to lose the car, and fantastic style. So we're going to have a great battle. Here is the standings after the first couple of races of the season. 3 different winners from 3 races in the LMGT3 AM. It is Stephen Miller, Becky Ely and Craig Pullen that have struck gold in the first part of the season, with Trash Panda Racing taking an early advantage over Reptile Racing in their BMW M4. So the battle for the title is still very close between Miller, Ed Jones and Eugene Mazur. Just 13 points covering the top 3 drivers. And Long Beach is one of those circuits that really can throw the cat amongst the pigeons. All sorts of unpredictability to come. In LMGT3, well, it's been Luciano Icazo that has just about held on from Vasilis Katerinakis and Eliseo Neto, along with JT Tammy. The 3 different race winners have been outscored so far by Luciano Icazo in the Bentley Continental GT3. Consistency, the name of the game at the early point of 2023. Stardust Autosports have also been able to keep the Acura up at the sharp end of the standings in the teams. And in Hypercar AM, it's all been about Wayne Hutchison in the Porsche 963. Guillermo Benchka has been able to put the Caddy up there at the top spot, and there's only 6 points between them, as well as Felipe Henrique and Barry DiMarzo in the Acuras being very consistent in terms of scoring points. There's a long way still to go in 2023. And here at Long Beach, it's definitely going to be particularly exciting. In Hypercar itself, Dan Kirby and Mia Rose have been the ones to get the victories. Mia winning twice, Dan Kirby winning the once. But as a result of the consistency of the battles through the first 3 races, there is just 9 points between them. Tom Lane, John Uyan and Timon Suvic are fairly close together as well. And it's going to be a very interesting battle here at Long Beach as the 4 categories will go to battle around the circuit. As you can see, Hypercar tyre choice is going to be an intriguing one. We've got soft and mediums, and GTs have obviously got all three compounds at their disposal, as always, with wet tyres on standby. Not that we're likely to need them tonight. Looks like it's going to be perfectly bone dry for the 60 minutes here at Long Beach, California. No need to worry about a change in the weather conditions. As always, there are individual and unique challenges with these particular circuits. But of course, here at Long Beach, it's obviously a narrow street circuit, and it is quite short in length, so you don't get a lot of build-up of speed. Traffic is going to be very intense indeed on this circuit, with it being so short. Passing opportunities are few and far between, and being consistent on a circuit as bumpy and as narrow as this can be one of the most unique challenges that you're going to find pushing to the limit on this particular circuit. It's definitely going to spell some fantastic battles ahead, and as qualifying is about to get underway, we really can get ourselves into a nice frame of mind. So crack open a cold one, get yourselves ready for a very exciting battle. The 60 minutes, I should say, of Long Beach, California here are definitely going to be intriguing as far as the title battle is concerned. I've waffled for long enough. Let's bring in Stephen Carabelas and Alec King. Stephen, good to see you. It looks like it's going to be a very interesting one tonight.
Yep, great to be here. And yeah, Long Beach, when is it not interesting? Those walls are very scary, very, very scary indeed. We've also got orange sectors between turns 1 and 5. Whereby it's pretty much single file racing there. If you're going to make a move there, you've got to get it spot on, or you're going to get a huge penalty. Got some other interesting tidbits of news of Long Beach as well. Today is actually the 40th anniversary since it was last raced in F1. I believe that game was race was won by James Watchin, who won from 23rd, and still to this day holds the record for a win in F1 from the lowest position as well, passing Nicky Lauda for the win in the final 5 laps. But yeah, Long Beach, what can you say about it? It's one of those street tracks that is absolutely deadly. There are some very tricky corners, lots of 90-degree rights and lefts, and in multi-class racing, you've got to be on the ball. The traffic here, it's a short track, is going to be a nightmare.
Oh, indeed. I still watch those reruns of the 1983 US Grand Prix West from Long Beach. John Watson's drive, still one of my favourites in Formula One history. I'll be waxing lyrical about that with him in a couple of weeks' time when we go to Monza, and I get to work with him for the very first time. Alec King is our technical bod on the scene, who knows all the ins and outs, or very nearly all the ins and outs of the cars, runners and riders. It's going to be an interesting one, Alec. This is definitely one of the tougher challenges in VWSC.
Yes. With this track and it being such a narrow street circuit, traffic is really going to come into play. It's such a short lap here with the main hypercars running around the 110 range. So with it being so short and so tight and the amount of cars we have on track, traffic is definitely going to come into play. But also strategy with this race, with how the fuel plays out. Some guys, we're going to see some guys be able to make a one stop, but some are definitely going to have to make a second stop. So how well can you manage your fuel mileage throughout this race to try and make it to the end and put yourself in a good position?
Now, what's going to be really interesting here at Long Beach, I think, in particular, Stephen, is that what we've got in 2023, based on the first few races of the championship, is that we've got these two sets of drivers essentially on the same grid. We've got this really interesting dynamic of drivers that were here for the last couple of seasons, the familiar faces, the Dan Kirbys, the Timon Suvics, the John Uyans, who know the circuit, know the style of racing here in VWSC very well. And then we've got these fantastic... this amazing sort of barrage of new talent, of new names that have come straight up to the top spot and are already trying to outpace the established guard. It's been fascinating to see in these first 3 events in 2023 just how evenly matched those two groups of drivers already are.
Yeah, it's always a tricky one when you're coming into a new series as well. From the new driver's point of view, it is a case of a lot to get up to speed with very, very quickly. But those drivers who have established themselves here as well are also going to have some problems to associate with that as well, because you're coming up to the guy, he's new, you don't know what he's going to do, you don't know how aggressive he's going to be, you don't know how hard he's going to defend. So it's a learning experience for many people here, and it's a learning experience for us as well, I suppose, as we get to grips with what the drivers are like and what their traits are as well. And a street track definitely brings out the best in those who tend to be a little bit more cautious, but somebody who has got that aggressive streak in them can certainly win big as well.
Watching the drivers finishing off their practice session before we get into the nitty-gritty of qualifying. Timon Suvic actually trail-breaking around the streets of Long Beach. Alec, this is exactly the kind of thing that we were hoping to see out there on the circuit. Drivers are really going to find that the Hypercar will not handle in any way a similar format to what we have seen from them on the permanent road courses.
Yes, with this track, it's there's a lot of different areas with different how the track with the pavement and everything. So it's going to make these cars really, really tricky. You go from concrete to asphalt to normal pavement, and it can make it very, very difficult. So these hypercars definitely are struggling with the amount of downforce they have and how these things handle. When you put them on a street circuit, it is a rough, bumpy, and tricky ride, as we can see here in practice. So it's definitely going to be interesting, and with all the characteristics and everything that's going to happen in this race, it's going to make it very, very fun and enjoyable for us up here.
Now, early predictions, Stephen, coming into this one. Obviously, in most of the classes, it's been pretty unpredictable, very even as well across the classes as the qualifying begins in the GT category. Based on what we've seen in the first 3 races, obviously we've had 3 different winners across the 3 LMGT3 AM category races, and in GT3 itself, it's been very, very competitive, but 4 drivers are in the title fight and 3 different winners. Are we likely to see a 4th here, or is this going to play into the hands of some of the drivers that have already got up to speed?
I think there's definitely going to be some familiar names near the top for sure. But looking at the times in practice, it looks as though it's we've got Rudy De Bruyne, who is looking to really kind of put some pressure on that established top lot. But he's had some decent results so far in the season, but no points out last time out in Sebring. And he'd be looking to make amends for that. So he's somebody I've got my eye on, but I'm sure there's going to be lots of surprises, as there always is at Longbeach.
So out onto the circuit the drivers go. 20 minutes of qualifying as always. The first 10 minutes for the GT3 categories. The second 10 minutes for the Hypercars. And this is going to be a tricky one. You'll find that there's going to be a few Hypercars that will actually struggle to match the consistency of the GTs. But the heavier cars, the GTs obviously, Alec, this is going to really punish tyres. That's going to be one of the things that's really going to impact on the battle up front.
Yes, it will. With the new tire update we actually got in rFactor 2, it's changed the compounds and characteristics a lot. Before this tire update, you basically would see everybody take soft tires in pit every stop, but now the soft tires wear a lot faster, so you have to rely on that medium and harder compounds. So we'll have to see what the plan is here today. It wouldn't surprise me to see the majority of the field take those medium tires, but I did see a lot of guys when they were in practice and running some longer fuel stints were running the softs, so we'll have to see how those tires degrade throughout the course of this race. I do believe with those guys who will take softs, we'll have to change tires on their pit stop, so it's going to make things very interesting on how the pit cycle and how the blend will be later on in this race.
So the outlap, the drivers just trying to get themselves up to speed. It's a short outlap, of course, because the circuit is such a little one by comparison to some of the circuits we're going to be competing at over the course of 2023. But if you compare this place, for example, to the Circuit de la South, this is a massive game changer. So obviously the drivers are just trying to work their way in. Very difficult, I would imagine, Stephen, to get the tyres up to temperature on a circuit quite so dynamic as this one.
It can be helped a little bit by the roughness of the surface and those bumps and things, but yeah, the tyre temperatures are going to be massive here, and making sure you've got those in the right window for your quick lap is going to be vital to getting a top level qualifying time in there as well. But there's 10 minutes each for each class, and that's enough maybe to get 3-4 laps in around here at Longbeach. So maybe they're going to have a couple of people doing an extra lap there, just kind of setting quite a slow banker, just getting the tyres up to temp. But yeah, it's going to be a struggle, but I'm sure plenty of these drivers have got enough experience and know-how and practice to make sure that they can get those into a workable window.
One of the interesting factors, again, about Longbeach being so short, Alec, of course, is that in a 10-minute qualifying session, they'll actually do more laps of the circuit if they are out from the green to the checkered than they would do at, say, some of the other fuller-length circuits. So that actually gives drivers a little bit more of an opportunity to find the lap that could put them up at the front.
Yes, it definitely gives you more options. You know, you can dive back into the pits and take a new set of tires if you need it, and it gives them a little bit more extra practice to tune in their setup and figure out what they need to make things work in this race. So, and it is very tricky with the amount of GT cars we have on track. We actually see some of the GT cars hit some traffic on their lap. So it's going to make it very tricky for qualifying here, especially in the hypercar. But as the race comes into play, traffic will definitely be important.
Just going to say, if the GT cars are hitting traffic on their qualifying, goodness knows how tough it's going to be when we get underway with racing. They're definitely going to find it pretty tricky. Now, looking at the sort of the pace difference between Hypercar and GT3 AM, it's not inconceivable, Stephen, that the leaders in Hypercar are going to start hitting traffic maybe as early as lap 5, possibly even lap 4.
Yeah, it all depends on what happens in that GT3 class as well. If there's an incident or somebody gets left behind in the early stages, then yeah, the Hypercars could be coming up on traffic a lot sooner than they expect. And that's not going to play well into their hands, because that's going to back them up. If they get stuck behind some GT3s there, it's going to back them up into the guys behind if they've managed to create a lead. And, well, tend not to see it. Tend to see people go in single file around the traffic. If an opportunity opens up whereby the guy in front of you in the hypercar that you're racing against gets held up a little bit by a GT3, you're aggressive and swift enough, decisive enough, you can take advantage of that and maybe make a pass because of it. But that is fraught with risk, and yeah, you've got to be really confident that the guy that you're overtaking is going to spot that move and see it coming as well, because the tiniest error here at Longbeach can spell a huge disaster. Those walls do not forgive. They have got no give in them whatsoever, and if you hit one, it can cause major problems. It can really, really unsettle the car, if not send it veering straight into traffic across the other side of the track. It is brutal here and ruthless. It is not one for the faint of heart. So these guys are going to have to be very patient and on the ball, really. They're going to have to be 100% focused to get things right here.
So to give you a sort of an idea as to how the lap times have been going in class leading up to this, the GT3s have been doing 1:17s in the GT3 Pro category, 1:18s in the AM. In the Hypercars, the fastest lap I think that we've seen so far in the build-up to this is Dan Kirby on a 1:08.2 and a 1:10.1 from Wayne Hutchison in the AM category. So that's a disparity of about 9 to 10 seconds per lap each class. So that's a very tricky one as far as pitching how quickly it's going to be for the Hypercars to catch the GTs in race trim. We're currently watching Mike Boyce in the Trash Panda Lamborghini, but Johnny Gutierrez and Sachin Sobers have definitely started off well with the Mercedes cars, as they are currently 1 and 2. Jamie Zadecki in the Stardust Autosport Acura, currently in 3rd position in front of JT Tammy in the Champion Aston. Brandon Gant currently P5 in the Nissan. Then it is Max Sunthunlap in the BMW M4, Brendan McVeigh in the Porsche, Mike Boyce in the Trash Panda Lambo, then Vinicius Gonçalves in his Audi, and Matt Boyce in the 2nd of the Trash Panda Lamborghinis, 10th position at the moment. Becky Healy doing a good job in the Acura, 11th position at the moment from Craig Pullen in the Reptile BMW, Eugene Mazur in the Pazuzu Ferrari, Mike Olsen in the Lamborghini. Up to 9th now comes Eugene Mazur. So he's trying to work his way slightly further forward. Currently the top 5 cars covered by less than a second. And there is Johnny Gutierrez in his Mercedes with the Richard Mille branding, really trying to work his way further forward. Alec, this is going to be an interesting one to see just who has something left in reserve, because you obviously get that little bit of a raft from drivers who want to try and open up the taps nice and early to establish, you know, their authority and their pace on the session. There could be 1 or 2 drivers hoping to hide something up their sleeves and leave it for the last moment.
Yes. I believe Johnny Gutierrez is going to be one of those guys. He had some of the fastest laps in practice before the race. He actually went about 0.6 faster in practice than what he is right now in qualifying. So definitely believe some of our front runners have a little bit left in the tank and are going to let it unleash come race time. Don't want to play your cards too early and let everyone see your full outright pace for them to try and come pick it back up to match you. But definitely going to be interesting with how these cars handle, you know, with the mechanical grip that the GT3 cars have over the prototypes. You're going to find in certain areas that people are, some of the GT3s are going to be a little bit faster than the prototypes through some of the slower end corners. So it's going to make things very, very interesting.
So the closing couple of moments of qualifying then in the GT category, of course. Johnny Gutierrez and Sachin Sobers still up at the front end. They're on their 7th qualifying lap, 6 if you count the fact, if you don't count the fact obviously that their out lap is not going to be particularly quick. There is JT Tammy in the Champion Aston Martin, and so far, of course, there are 20 cars total out there on the course in the GT category. 3.3 cars covering 3.3 seconds, I should say, covering the 20 cars. Larry Thomas, though, in the McLaren, has put himself in 21st position of the runners, but as you can see, he's currently not out on the circuit. There is James Bowders, who is bookmarking the field at the moment in the 20th position in his Porsche, but 3.3 seconds is not bad going, actually, as now James Bowders is trying to get a little bit of a pace advantage. It's so tight, that final hairpin, and we've seen multiple drivers trying to get the radius of that final hairpin right, Stephen. It is so difficult to get right.
Certainly is. A corner that it just seems to tighten forever when you're in the car, and it just you're willing it to make that corner. And if it doesn't make it, obviously you've got nowhere to go. There is no runoff, and you're going to smash that wall on the outside there. But it is also an overtaking spot, I believe, as well. I've seen plenty of moves done there. If you manage to get on the outside in the corners beforehand, you get the inside for that hairpin, and the other guy has to pretty much give it up. But yeah, it's a tricky one, and you've got to have the setup spot on in order to get the rotation available to the car for you to be able to make it. But it's one of the slowest speed corners, if not the slowest speed corner, I believe, on the track as well. Yeah, definitely not easy by any stretch.
So the final couple of minutes of the session ticking away as we now get ourselves very close into deciding who is going to be in the pole position mark then in the GT category. I do believe we have now gone into the second group of drivers. So it looks like Sachin Sobes has managed to outfox Johnny Gutierrez right at the bitter end there. According to that timer, we have got less than 10 minutes to go. So the GT drivers will peel straight into the pits this time. And of course, we're going to see the Hypercars really starting to push it as they now come out onto the circuit. There is Tom Lane just warming up the tyres and the brakes. But for the record, in GTs, Sachin Sobes gets the job done in front of Johnny Gutierrez. Jimmy Zalechki in front of Brandon Gant and JT Tammy. Becky Ely popped up with a great lap at the end there. 6th position for her, 1.1 away from the pole. Max Southernlap in 7th in front of Brendan McVeigh, Mike Boyce and Eugene Mazur. Vinicius Gonçalves in front of Matt Boyce and Craig Pullen, Vinicius de Oliveira and Roland Haganars, and then Peter Mayer, Mike Olsen, Stephen Miller, Adam Gray, James Bowders and Larry Thomas. 3.7 seconds eventually completing and covering the whole field. Hypercar time. Alec, predictions. This could be very tricky to call.
Yes, with all the different characteristics we're going to have in this race, with traffic, the track surface, and everything that's going to happen with their fuel strategy and tires, it's going to make this very interesting. But my predictions for this race are pretty cut clear. I've got to go with John Yuan and Walter de Bruyn. They have been front runners all season this season. We are missing Dan Kirby here today, who has had a really staking hand on the races so far. So you can't bet against Walter and John Yuan, though. They're in the team championship. Their teams are fighting right now for the team championship, and they are both fighting for the drivers' championship. So a big swing in points we're going to see here today, and they've been the fastest overall in practice, hoping to have a good qualifying here. And if they do that, those are the guys I'm going to have to go with for a top finish here today.
Yeah, Tom Lane's on board. You really can see the brute physicality and just the sheer torque and traction of these hypercars around the Longbeach street circuit. This is not the easiest race circuit in the best of cars, in the best of times, and you just get such a feeling of pure adrenaline rush. And look at the radius of the car. You've got to be so smooth just to keep the back end from kicking out all the way throughout. This is a really tricky situation as Tom Lane has gone up to the top spot with a 1:09.7 as he has come through. So it's a good opening gambit then for Tom Lane. A good start to proceedings. Walter de Bruyn just getting himself up to speed in the Rookie Monster BMW. This is again going to be an interesting test, Stephen, as to which team has got their car choice right, because a lot of teams obviously base their car choice based on personal preference of feel. This circuit could expose quite a few weaknesses for a few of the hypercars.
Certainly will, yeah, but we see there the Porsche from Tom Lane with a fantastic lap in there is proven to be very smooth and responsive for him. It is one of its better traits, though, like you say. It is supposed to be fast in acceleration and good in the corners, and that's going to prove it stand it in very good stead around Longbeach, which is a very tricky track to get right in terms of the corners, especially, and not a great deal of straight speed sections that are it's going to take advantage of there if it was going to top speed. So there's going to be a couple of cars that maybe are going to struggle a little bit around here. The Glickenhaus in particular, which is not particularly good around the corners. I don't know if we've got in one of those this week to see how that gets on, if we've got anybody at all, because we've got any drivers there. But it's an interesting thing to bring up, really. Yeah, the difference in the cars and how they're going to handle this track, and which ones are going to come out on top is going to be very, very interesting. We've also got the Peugeot up there high on the list as well, with John Uyan in second place with the Hypercar there for CMS Pro, and that one's proving to be pretty good as well. And that Peugeot is good in the straight line. It's also good in the corners as well. It's a bit average on the acceleration side of things. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those cars fare together when racing against each other as well, and whether or not that straight line speed allows the guys in the faster straight line cars to make the moves, and then if they can defend them after that, the guys behind them quicker in the corners are going to be piling on the pressure. But if you haven't got the straight line speed, you can't get past where you need to get past, maybe much ado about nothing.
Yeah.
Big swapper there.
Yes, well, big spin from John. Yes. But this race is definitely going to be very interesting with all the things that are going to play out as we go. Look, John Yuan going back out on a sight lap. Ross Smith currently right now in P10 with a 1:11.4. I know he has a little bit more pace than that. Just probably didn't get a good lap, hit a little bit of traffic in qualifying. But as we got 5 minutes left in this session, it's really going to start narrowing down here. We have a couple of Hypercars who haven't been able to put in laps yet, but are look to be on their time lapse right now, so hopefully we'll see some more names come up on the board. And we actually see Walter De Bruyn go P2 right now with a 1:9.556. About 0.8 of a second off of Tom Lane right now in that Porsche. That Porsche is going to be very strong here today. It doesn't have the greatest straight line speed, but it has one of the best handling It's one of the best handling hypercars we have out here. So I definitely look to see the Porsches come back in this race. They've struggled a little bit in the past. Mia Rose actually was able to get a win with it in Portugal. But here today, it's definitely going to make things interesting.
Fascinating to see that we've got 3 different manufacturers in the top 3 positions so far. Porsche, BMW and Peugeot right up at the sharp end. Tom Lane, though, really has got the handle of the Manta Squid Porsche at the moment. 0.7 of a second in front of Walter De Bruyn, who is still very consistent in second position, but you just get the feeling that Tom Lane's got that little bit of extra added confidence coming into qualifying. He seems to know where he can place the car, where he can go over the curbs, and where he can really position the car back on throttle. That's the real key here, Stephen, isn't it? Throttle application, coming off these tight square rights, square lefts. That's where you can really lose ground, but you can also gain a lot of time as well.
Certainly is, yeah. You've got to be sure that you're getting the entry spot on, but the entry is never important as the exit in racing, as we all know. Slow in, fast out, and getting the exits right here, because each is a 90-degree corner followed by a straight. It's vitally important that you get that right so that you can maximise all your time down each of these straights. But there are a couple of tricky sectors here on the track as well. The fountain/flower plot of turns 2 and 3 as well. Want to carry as much speed as you can through there and just keep the car stable. There's going to be the order of the day around any street circuit is always stability and smoothness. And the cars that have that in the bag already, that have that in their locker, that have the handling characteristics to make that easier on the drivers, are going to do well.
So these closing couple of minutes then are going to be very telling. Is anyone going to get close to the mark set so far by Tom Lane, who are on a very solid charge here for the Manta Squid Porsche team. George Angelidis just getting himself up to 13th in the Acura so far. There is a very colourful machine. That is the Peugeot of Gilles Lalonde making his way down the pit lane. I do love the interpretation of this scintillating hypercar. It's such an amazing concept of a race car anyway, but the way that they have decided to maximise the unique display and the unique presentation of the Peugeot, it's very impressive indeed. Gilles Lalonde going for something just a little bit different there. Meanwhile, Walter De Bruyn chipping away at it. John Uyan in the CMS Peugeot, however, is still a 1/4 of a second back from Walter De Bruyn. This is going to be very tough indeed to find time. Brad Sellers in his BMW has gone 0.2 of a second slower than Uyan. Dahlgren is another 10th back. Timon Suvic is only 0.02 of a second slower than the ME Ferrari of Magnus Dahlgren. So it is very tight indeed at the top, Alec. Where on earth do you find that little bit of an advantage as John Uyan tries to find it and the back end almost overtakes the front?
Yes, very, very tricky here at this track. It's all on corner exit. With how these tight corners are, you really have to get your line, your racing line correct. It can be really tricky because a lot of these corners are all blind corners. You cannot see the exit with the tight 90 degrees. So trying to find that line and float to the edge, ride the wall as much as you can without making contact is the best way to try and find some speed. And as we see, Tom Lane seems to have that figured out and is able to put it on pole so far.
Now, where is there going to be any respite for any of the others to try and find just a little bit of an opportunity to close in? Because there's not much to choose really between the drivers in the first sector, although Tom Lane has definitely been able to find a lot of his time in that first split. But it's the consistency across the lap. That's what really tells the story here for Tom Lane. He just has that tenacity, that sheer grit to be able to throw the car in. And these cars are mighty fast around these tight twisties. I mean, we saw an onboard shot a little earlier on as the cars try and negotiate these very tight and twisty sections. Here is Tom Lane's onboard. Now check this out. Left, right, tight radius, left, get it back on the lock stops, break down into the right hander, hug the wall, get a little bit of curb, try and correct it without losing the back end of the car. This is that is how easy it is to lose it, and Tom Lane, even Tom Lane, cannot get it done perfectly. That just shows you the margin of error is so narrow here, Stephen. This is not easy at all, and even the fastest drivers have been struggling, but Tom Lane will not improve on a 108.7.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate from there. That corner, that was turn 6, I believe. Sorry, coming out of turn 5, I believe, down into turn 6, It just gets away from the corner. It's a little bit off camber there. It tries to suck you into that wall, and if you don't have the speed and the power down it firmly enough, it will just drag you into that wall, as Tom Lane has found out to his detriment. But that gives other drivers now the opportunity to make up that gap. 7/10 was the gap there, as well as Subic puts in a decent 9.5 time, but still some way off the lead of Tom Lane. Now, has he done enough in the early stages of this qualifying to secure his pole position, I wonder?
I've got a feeling that nobody's really going to get close to it. Simon Suvic's time was a personal best in every split. But if you look at Tom Lane on a 108.7 compared to Wouter de Bruin in second on a 109.5, that is just extraordinary how much time he's been able to find compared to his opponents out there. It's one thing to do it over one lap. Can you do it over 60 minutes? Tom Lane taking the victory in the pole position run in front of Wouter de Bruin and Timon Subic. John Uyan in fourth position in front of Magnus Dahlgren in the Ferrari. Brad Sellers in P6 in front of Matthew Overton, Alexander Schultz and Brian Hall in the two Acuras, and then Wayne Hutchison in the Porsche in 10th position. Then it is, it is Gilles Lalonde who is in 10th position, in fact. Wayne Hutchison in front of Philippe Henrique, and then Norm Graff ahead of George Angelidis, Ross Smith and Jason Whitehead. Guillaume Benchka is next up, and then of course we have the GT runners such as Sobers in the Mercedes, just a whisker in front of Johnny Gutierrez. Jamie Zalechki is the next one in the mix, and then we have Brandon Gant in front of JT Tammy, and then it is Becky Ely in front of Max Sunderlap and Brendan McVeigh. Then Mike Boyce, Eugene Mazur, Vinicius Gonçalves and Matt Boyce in front of Craig Pullen in 29th. Then Vinicius de Oliveira, Roland Hagenars and Peter Meyer from Mike Olsen, Stephen Miller, Adam Gray, James Bowders, and at the back of the grid in the McLaren, it will be Larry Thomas. However, qualifying is very different indeed from race trim, and 60 minutes around this Long Beach circuit is going to be brutal. Alec, this is going to be a test of steel, and the most disciplined, the most calm, and the most composed drivers are going to be the ones that get the results here.
Yes, a track like this and the circumstances we have today, you won't be able to run the full race at 100%. You have to back it down and drive the car at about 7/10 just to be careful as you manage through traffic and to save your fuel. And with everything that they need to do today in this race, it's going to make things very, very tricky for everybody. But whoever can be the smartest through traffic and handling their strategy is going to come out on top. If you try to overpush the car, and you'll end up hitting and having an incident in traffic, and it'll just ruin your race for you.
We've already heard Alex 2 cents on the race that's coming up. Stephen, penny for your thoughts. Who do you think is going to be able to take the victory? Has Tom Lane's pace from qualifying done enough to convince you that that can be transferred to a full 60-minute run?
Honestly, yeah, it has. I mean, 7 8/10 is a big margin there. So if he can just get one lap like that, in one lap, immediately he's going to have broken the toe. But the traffic could cause absolute mayhem as well. So it's anybody's guess, really. It all depends on whether or not Tom Lane's got the patience and the focus to get around that traffic. But it certainly seems as though he's got the margin at the moment. And yeah, it's It looks like chat is enjoying a great Easter by the looks of things as well there on YouTube as well. Obviously, we've got that holiday upon us at the moment, Easter weekend, and not something that I personally celebrate very much these days in the UK. What about you, Jake?
So we're now getting ourselves into the running then for the battles ahead of us. It's going to be a really intriguing 60 minutes of Longbeach in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. Jake Sanson, Stephen Carabelas and Alec King with you as we will talk our way through 60 minutes, the fourth race in the VWSC Hypercar 2023 Championship battle running through rFactor 2. Do keep your comments and your messages coming in. It's great to have your patronage and to hear what you guys have to say about the race coming up. I'm sure you've all got your opinions and your thoughts as to who is going to get the job done here, and these significant play-by-plays are obviously very valuable from you guys as well as from the three of us. So a fascinating start to proceedings. Porsche strike gold in qualifying in the hypercar category. Mercedes do so in GT3. A lot of interesting questions still to be answered, but Longbeach has definitely struck against pretty much every driver in the field at one stage. Even Tom Lane, the man who found 0.7 of a second compared to Wouter de Bruyn, was not able to keep it out of the wall, Alec. If that happens again in the race, well, all bets are off.
It's a bad omen, isn't it? So, oh, sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. Yes, it's definitely going to be tricky. Like we said, you have to tone it down a little bit. You know, in qualifying, you want to go all out for that speed, and he found that speed with qualifying on pole, but he went past it, as we saw when he hit the wall. So being able to manage yourself and hold yourself back, you know, everyone in here is racers. You want to push all out through the whole race. But with a track like this and with the circumstances with traffic, you definitely need to back it down just a little bit to be smart and make it to the finish.
And this is one of those races that really is going to bite. I mean, we have seen some very competitive first three races of the season, but if anything's going to kick off, it's going to kick off here. And that's the thing about this circuit as well, Stephen. It's the chain reaction. You know, there are so many blind apexes and so many fast blind apexes as well. One car hits the wall. There's no telling what sort of carnage can ensue as a result of that. Drivers really have to be on their toes.
Yeah, you have to be prepared for everything. You've got to always be thinking about, if I come around this corner and there is a car sideways, what do I do? Yellow flags, and obviously everybody in the community here is in voice chat together. It will help with that, for certain. Letting people know what's going on around the track, and hopefully people can talk to each other a little bit in terms of how navigating traffic and things like. But it is going to be one of those where it's racing. I mean, you cannot avoid incidents in racing, as much as we would love to sometimes. Sometimes they add to the excitement, and I think we're going to have a very exciting one here today. It's going to be very tricky for the drivers, and you never know what's going to happen in these kind of situations. If something happens up the sharp end, then maybe somebody who starts this race in the lower echelons could end up taking advantage of that by dodging the wreckage and coming out smelling of roses. So it could happen. I've seen stranger things happen in racing for sure.
Now, one of the things we do need to talk about going into this 60-minute race in particular is pit stop strategy and tactics. Alec, what are we likely to see play out on the whole from drivers? Is it going to be a fairly aggressive strategy, a very aggressive stance, or do drivers need to be a little bit more conservative this time?
A little bit of both. So some cars definitely, like the Peugeot, it burns a little bit more fuel. So you either will want to go aggressive and have to make your two stops if you can get out front. But with the pace we're seeing, it's not looking like that. So definitely some guys are going to try and do a single stint and save some fuel throughout the majority of the race. But in order to do that, you have to start fuel saving from lap one. And that can be very difficult with everyone else that is pushing ahead of you. So being conservative may pay off in the end, but if you lose too much time and give too much of a gap, someone may be able to double stint. Well, not double stint, but make a second stop, take fresh tires, and put themselves in a better position. So it's going to be very tricky with how it's going to play out today.
So 60 minutes around the California streets, the fourth round of the 2023 season. Obviously, the drivers just going through the motions of the driver's briefing. And of course, once that is all done and dusted, we can then start to think about racing under a couple of minutes of warm-up the drivers will have. But this is always a very interesting, intense time. You know, you've come out of qualifying. Drivers may have had a game plan that's come to fruition, and others are going to have it very much having gone against them. So This is a time, Stephen, where as a sim racer, you essentially have to regroup. You have to try and reset yourself, reprogram your thoughts and your emotions. You have to try and get yourself into the right frame of mind on a circuit that's going to throw a million variables at you.
Certainly is, yeah. Now's the time to kind of just try and clear your head, essentially. When I'm in these situations, I like to try and force myself into what is known as what I call the trance state, like almost a meditative state, whereby I stare at one particular thing and try to not remove my focus from that. Try and clear your thoughts and just be as calm as possible. And breathing exercises, all kinds of things, yoga, whatever it takes to get you in that frame of mind. You can start doing backflips in your room if you've got the space. I certainly don't have that in my room. But yeah, it's going to be tough for these guys to kind of calm those nerves. And those nerves do appear as they would in a normal racing for sim racers as well. Your heart definitely starts beating a bit faster as things start getting underway. And I imagine it starts beating faster from the driver's briefing when you're getting shouted at by the race director saying, don't overtake anybody anywhere ever. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to do that here. Please don't cause the incidents. Please don't cause any major incidents. We don't want to see anything like Spa back in the day when there was absolute nightmares at Spa. Just 19 of 20 cars kind of going upside down, all that kind of thing. But looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting, it's going to be eventful, it's going to be dramatic, and yeah, looks like we've got some cars looking to come out now for the formation lap. So they'll be doing a quick one lap around formation, and then it will be a rolling start, I believe, and you go once the lights are green as you cross the finish line. So it's not going to be like some of our viewers might think like an F1 rolling restart. It is, you can only go once you cross the finish line. But
indeed, I see you've been in the same race offices as I have. Then clearly with the sort of the stress that you get from the race directors. No, they do a fantastic job. This is quite an important thing we're seeing here for those who are not clear on this one, Alec. This is quite an important part of the race prep, going through the warm-up session. A lot of the drivers peeling down pit road and then finding their pit box. Now this is quite an important part of the race because you can lose quite a bit of time if you don't negotiate your pit box in quite the right manner.
Yes, and one of the main reasons why they actually do this is they do a pit box check because in rFactor 2 on some of the tracks there is not as many pit stalls as there are people in the server. So some people actually have to share a pit stall, and that can be really confusing. Now all of the drivers are in a driver's channel, so if they need to communicate it whenever someone is making a stop, they can do so, but just being able to find it and see if you have to share with somebody, so that way you can prep yourself and try and plan ahead a little bit on your stops. Most of the time that's not the case. I believe here today we don't have to worry about that, but it's definitely another challenge that the drivers have to face.
And certainly in terms of what the drivers are likely to face, it's definitely a very random opportunity for a few of the drivers out there. Some of them will want to work their way through the traffic quite smartly, and obviously depending on how close the driver is that they are battling with behind them, that can obviously play into the hands. But one of the difficulties again, Stephen, is that you've got drivers that are going to have a real gaggle of traffic to deal with, and then you've also got the flotsam and jetsam of trying to get out of the draft of battling drivers in other classes. I mean, let's say for example you've got Tom Lane and Wouter de Bruin out in front with a decent advantage out front, and it doesn't matter if they don't make a mistake. If a car in front of them does and basically takes them with them for collateral damage, you know, that's something that you can't really, a lot of drivers will not have a lot of time to react to that.
yeah, certainly as well. And on top of that as well, when you've got these traffic lines forming as well, you might find as a hypercar driver that you've come around a corner and all of a sudden you've got 5, 6, 7 sometimes, depending on how close these grids end up being, cars in front of you, and you've got to get through them all in short order as well. You've got a guy behind you fighting you for position, and that could mean that you get held up and pushed back further into their realm of influence as well. So even if Tom Lane gets a good start, he's going to have lots of clear air for the first 7 or 8 laps, like we said before. It'll take a while for them to catch up with the GT3s. Once he does catch up with those GT3s, they could slow him down to the point whereby any advantage that he's gained over the first 10 minutes or so is just nullified by having to work his way around those traffic. The guy behind not having to deal with that until he catches up to the back of Tom Lane, whoever that may be at the time. But yeah, I mean, these guys, the Hypercars are going to have to be aware, very aware, and the guys in the GT3s are going to have to be, that all-important word in any multi-class race, predictable. That is the main thing.
And of course, remember that we've got 4 different races going on at the same time across the Hypercar Pro-Am and GT3 Pro-Am. So there are so many different races going on within the same bit of road. And that's going to be very tricky to balance, particularly for the drivers who are hoping to make a little bit of a gain. We're at the point of the championship when drivers are hoping to have broken into a bit of a rhythm. And maybe they will think they can use this particular race as a chance to bounce back and get themselves a little bit higher up in terms of the championship standings. And looking at the points at the moment, Alec, there's going to be quite a few drivers, I think, that will use this as an opportunity to take a bit of a risk, to take a bit of a gamble. There'll be a couple of drivers out there who can feel, you know, if there's a chance to pick up big points when a couple of their rivals may drop the ball somewhat, this is the golden opportunity to get their championship assault back on track.
Yes. You know, we're a couple rounds into this series already, and we still have a lot to go, so there is still chances to make up points, but you don't want to have that gap be too much to where you won't be able to get it back at the end of the season. So now that the drivers have a few races under their belt, they're in their groove, they have their cars pretty much figured out at this point, you definitely have to try and take that risk a little bit to try and gain some points. Now, it is scary having to do it here at Longbeach with the circuit that we've already talked about that is just too much to handle as is. So it's going to make things very, very tricky for everybody. Do you push to try and make up some ground, or do you play it safe? You know, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw someone to try and take that safe route, and then their rival in front of them make a mistake and lose a lot of points. So just have to play your cards right, and it'll make it very interesting.
This is where tactics and team strategy, team play, really comes into the fore. We've got a few teams out there, of course. The Trash Panda Racing team with 2 cars. We've obviously got the team from Speed Details have got a couple of cars in the grid, I do believe. And you've obviously got, you know, the regulars from Noon Racing obviously trying to work their way further forward, the Hall Brothers team. And there's going to be several teams out there that are obviously going to be working in unison to try and move their way further forward. I'm looking particularly at Reptile Racing BMW. Got 2 fast drivers there who can utilize the strategy and work together. And that's an interesting dynamic as well, Stephen. You can kind of bounce ideas off each other to really try and gain a little bit of confidence, a little bit of an upper hand on your opposition.
Yeah, certainly teamwork in these kind of races is vitally important. If you've got a teammate who can help you out, it gives you a margin over some of your rivals who maybe don't have that teammate as well. So we're going to see some interesting things. Obviously, we've also got the championship for the team championship there as well, to also fight for, and it's going to come into play if you've got you know, one of your teammates' main rivals sniffing your backside. Then it might be a good idea to hold them up, to try and fight, defend that position a bit harder than you normally would, in order to get your teammate back into play. So all those factors are going to come into play for sure in what is going to be a long race. There's hopefully people that do go for that safe route, but like we were saying before, aggression can sometimes fortune favours the bold. Sometimes sending it up the inside early, knowing that the guy in front of you is going to be maybe thinking about survival rather than racing, that can sometimes pay off dividends. At the same time, though, it is a huge risk, and sometimes can ruin your race and make it extremely short. We've also got David Young in chat at the moment saying, is the 963 missing interior graphics? There's not enough footage of it so far, but yeah, it's an interesting take. I don't know is the question. Answer that.
Yes, it is. This mod is still in development. It is only available right now for the league racers and people who are running in our series. They are being updated and finished. The Cadillac actually was the first car to have the full interior completed. So as of right now, no, it does not have interior graphics. It does have a steering wheel that you can see, but everyone here does run a HUD to see your rev lights and everything else. But the Porsche, the Peugeot, the Ferrari, they do not have interiors fully completed yet. They will be coming soon, though. Some insider scoop from Storm Gang Simulation, who have created these cars, have said that they have them almost completed, and so we should see full interiors and full detail on our hypercars within the next 2 rounds.
It never ever ceases to amaze me, the level of detail that these guys go into. I mean, it's always been fascinating all the way through last year when we had obviously Hypercar at one end and then Group C at the other. The level of detail, it was one of the most exquisite mods I think I've ever seen in the whole 30 years of virtual racing that I've been involved with in various different ways. I mean, I can still remember some of the sim racing titles that were essentially there before sim racing was even a concept term, and to see these amazing visuals that the guys at SGS have come up with, it's just astonishing. Wouter de Bruin just finishing off his warm-up there, having a little bit of a practice of negotiating the traffic. That's the thing. That's going to be the key, isn't it, Alec? As Stephen touched on earlier, predictability is definitely going to be the buzzword here, and I think you've got to remember that the driver, it's a difficult one because on this particular street circuit you don't have a lot of room to play with, admittedly, but the onus has still got to be on the driver doing the overtake. The guy in front has got to stay to the racing line wherever possible. The onus is on the guy making the overtake, whoever that might be, to move off the racing line and make a clear move for position. You cannot really depend on the guy in front getting out of your way on a circuit like this where there is literally zero runoff.
Yes, with how tight this circuit is, it can kind of get into a one-line racing line for everybody. So the Hypercars are definitely going to have to look to make their move down the two main straights we have, the back straight as we see now with Jason Witted on right now, and then the front stretch. So there's not many places to overtake, so making your move can be very tricky. And as we touched about earlier, we do have the orange zone for the first lap of the race through turns 1 through 5, but we also have a mandatory red zone, and the red zone is through 2, 3, and 4. That will take place all race. So with that being said, if you make a dumb move, and those two couple section of corners, for everyone not listening, is through the fountain area where it gets really, really tight. And what those orange and red zones mean is that you can race as normal, but if you have an incident where you push someone wide or cause an incident, the penalties will be harsher than what they were on other areas of the track. Longbeach is the only track on the calendar that we have that red zone implemented. But we only do that just to make sure everyone can be safe through there, and so that way we don't have anyone to try and make any risky moves and cause a big incident that could ruin the race.
So let's get some clarification, Alec, on that particular one when you were talking about the starting procedure, because obviously it's going to be an interesting one for the first lap. It's not going to be particularly easy when you're obviously running, yes, in single file formation as we obviously do in VWSC, but still, there's going to be one or two drivers that will try and pick up an easy overtake if a car in front drops out. So just to clarify for us, what sort of pressure does that put on the drivers in the opening lap to make sure that essentially they complete it without getting into silly issues on the opening tour?
It makes it more interesting and provides a little bit more pressure. I've ran in this series before, and so you definitely feel it. You don't want to make any stupid moves that can cause a big incident where you'll get a penalty on the opening lap. But as we all know in racing, the opening lap is the best opportunity to make those passes because everyone's close together, so it's pretty easy to try and sneak a couple positions and get better track position. But with that orange zone and red zone implemented, you just have to be a little bit smarter. So it's okay to be bold, but it's not okay to be dumb. So you just have to pay attention to it.
Now the cars just getting themselves back to the pits once again, then the final few seconds of warm-up. Quite important to use every single minute of this particular warm-up. We've seen it in the past before when drivers have got used to the circuit. They probably won't use the entire 20 minutes of the session, but this time in particular, Stephen, it's quite critical that the drivers really use the circuit as often as they possibly can.
Yeah, these tricky tracks that we've mentioned it so many times, how difficult this track can be. Any street track is. Anything with walls that allows very little margin for error is going to be tricky. And the answer to how to deal with that is always going to be practice, practice, practice. And this is one of the few times that these guys are going to be able to practice with so many other cars on the grid as well. Ordinarily, practice sessions during the week or the run-up to the race are going to be sparsely populated. Very rarely get to practice with this many cars on the grid. So, as we're following on board here with Jason Whitehead, that gives you the opportunity to try and get around these GT3 cars and teach you where it's safe to do so and where you might have to be very early on the brakes there. As Jason found out there, coming into that hairpin in turn 11, he had to be very hard on the brakes there to avoid hitting the back of the GT3 in this warm-up. And that kind of experience is invaluable when it comes to the race.
So warm-up comes to a conclusion. Next, it's game time, and we are going to go racing around this Long Beach, California circuit that has been in operation in the motor racing world since 1976. It is a bit legendary. It is very prolific. They used to not only run IndyCar and sports car races here back in the day, but also, of course, the Toyota Celebrity Grand Prix, where you'd have some incredible names take to the racetrack for the first time. In some cases, many incredible names that you don't really get to see race cars would use this particular event as a springboard to use their fantastic wages to go and play at the race weekends. And for many of them, it's a very important location where all of that started. So there's a lot of significance about Longbeach in the world of motor racing. So obviously this is quite an important one. And for the drivers here, it's all about patience and discipline, as we have talked about several times over the top of the broadcast. So now we're going to get ourselves ready for position. And the competitors are now geared up for an exciting showcase. Tom Lane, Wouter de Bruin, Timon Suvic and John Uyan, your first two rows of the starting grid. Magnus Dahlgren and Bradley Sellers are next up. To round out the top 10, Matthew Overton alongside Alexander Schultz, and then Brian Hall ahead of Wayne Hutchison in his Porsche. Then we have Gilles Lalonde in front of Philippe Henrique, Norm Graf in front of George Angelidis, Ross Smith, Jason Whitehead in his Ferrari, Guillaume Benchka ahead of Sachin Sobers, the leading GT driver. Then Johnny Gutierrez and Jamie Zalechki is next up in the fray. Brandon Gant in front of JT Tammy. Becky Ely still going well in the Acura. Max Sinthanup and Brendan McVeigh. Mike Boyce and Eugene Mazur. Vinicius Gonçalves, Matt Boyce, and then Craig Pullen. And then behind them, the final stragglers, Vinicius de Oliveira, Roland Hagenars, Peter Mayer, Mike Olsen, Stephen Miller in front of Adam Gray. And then the final two, James Bowders in the Porsche and Larry Thomas in the McLaren. So much to do over the course of this race. And as you can see, the grid is being formed. So Stephen, this is where all of the anticipation and the build-up becomes very intense indeed. All the drivers now going around and warming up the tyres on this particular circuit harder than ever.
Yeah, it is crunch time, and the adrenaline is reaching peak heights at the moment as everybody's starting to get underway. And then once those lights go out and you're underway, all of that disappears, and the only focus that you're going to have is that car in front and the next corner, or at least you'd hope so anyway, because if you don't focus on that, then that's where the incidents occur. But looking forward to this. This is going to be an exciting race. There's a lot of drivers on the track. That means a lot of action, a lot of overtakes, and a lot of incidents.
As we mentioned at the top of the bill as well, Alec, this is going to be very tricky considering that, you know, the leaders in the hypercar category could even catch up to the tail end of the GTs as early as lap 4 or 5. So this is where patience and, you know, having a little bit of tenacity, having a little bit of foresight and playing the long game, working through the traffic, can either play positive or negative against your race strategy.
Yes, just being smart and managing is what they need to do. With the hypercars that are going to catch the GTs very fast, like we said, around lap 4 or 5, they're going to be in the zone of the all-out sprint for the first opening laps, trying to build a gap to the guys behind. But when you hit that traffic, you have to cut that out entirely and just manage and be smart and find the best way to overtake. It's better to be smart than sorry. So we'll have to see what they can do, and hopefully they can keep a level head and manage through everything. As we do see though, I would like to mention as we go on to our starting lap, the top 10 in Hypercar all are starting on soft tires. The first person on mediums is Gilles Lalonde in P11. So that's definitely going to be interesting. The soft tires, they wear fairly quickly, so I do imagine seeing them making a pit stop for tires when they go to take fuel. And then as we cut back into GT3, the top 2 in GT3, Sachin Sobers and Johnny Gutierrez in the 2 Mercedes, they are both starting on mediums, but the 2 cars behind them of Jamie Zalecki and Brandon Grant are also starting on the softs. So they'll be able to come through at the start, but we'll have to see what plays out.
So this is definitely going to be a very intriguing race battle, and obviously the cars are now making their way around on the formation lap. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. And the drivers are now trying to warm up the tyres and brakes to the optimum temperature, because this is quite an important part of the process as well, of course, Stephen. You've got to make sure that when you head down to turn 1, that square left-hander, you've got to have not just tyres and brakes to temperature, but you've got to have confidence that the car is actually going to stop, it's actually going to turn in. And you need to have absolute faith that the car is going to give you what you need on that opening tour.
Yeah, like I said before, it's all about practice before the day gets here. You must have done this a couple of times at least. Sometimes everybody talks about practice, but you've got to practice the right way, and you've got to practice as close to the race situation as you can get. So if you have not practiced doing an outlap and then starting on cold tyres, and you're doing it for the first time now, that's going to feel very nervous, and you're not going to have that confidence in the car that it's going to stop. But yeah, it's going to be a tricky one, and it's important to get, how are they going to do that as well? It's such a large grid. I can't imagine that the guys at the front are going to zoom away and try and do a fast formation lap, try and get the tyres up the temperature that way, because they would just lose all of the temperature as they're sat on the grid waiting for the rest of the drivers to make their way around. So I imagine this is going to be a slow one, and when you're going slow, you can't really get that much heat into the tyres. So it's going to be tough to get them into a working window, and I imagine that at the beginning of this race, a majority of the drivers are going to be aware of that, and that they're going to have very cold tyres, very cold brakes, and they're going to have to be maybe a little bit more cautious because of that. Maybe the guy who's in 4th, 5th, 6th or whatever, and has managed to get more temperature into his tyres, can take advantage of that. The guy who's got the confidence in his brakes can win big here at the start.
But Tom Lane and Sachin Sobers, all the hard work of qualifying now comes to a pressure point. This is where they've really got to work hard on the opening lap. They've got to consolidate the position they've managed to get themselves in. They don't want to do anything silly on the opening lap. We've seen both drivers push the limits, get the car wide. In Tom Lane's case, he actually struck the wall on his final qualifying lap. Doesn't take away his pole position, but it certainly puts a little niggling doubt in the back of the mind. You've got to be careful, you've got to be patient, and you've got to be ready for a very tough race in front of you. Tom Lane comes off the final hairpin. This is where he will come down the main straight, and we will get ready to go racing for the first time, and we will have the minute that the race gets underway be the most exciting and the most critical in terms of the pressure points. They come down the main starting straight, and Tom Lane is going to have us go racing as he comes through this time by, and so he hits the throttle and we go racing here at Long Beach, California. Good start from Tom Lane. He builds it nicely as they come up towards the hairpin. He's not going to approach that first corner as fast as he will do on the second lap, because he's obviously accelerated much later. So you've got to be very careful about how you go about things. Looks like a little bit of jockeying for position already behind the top four. So as Timon Subic works his way around the fountain, this has already been a fairly textbook start from the leading Hypercars. No major concerns for them as they work their way through on the opening lap, and 1 hour to go before the checkered flag flies for Timon Subic. He's already starting to put Wouter de Bruin under some pressure.
I want to start there from Tom Lane as well, though. He's already got over a second gap there as well, meaning that he's dropped the draft to the guys behind. It means that he's got very little pressure in terms of his first opening laps. He can take his time, get the car nicely warmed up, and the next thing he's got to worry about is those GT3 cars coming up. It's going to be very little chance of De Bruyne catching him, as he's got a lot to think about in his mirror is in Subic.
On board with Timon Subic then as he charges after the BMW hybrid in front of him down at the braking zone for the hairpin. A couple of drivers already starting to push the limits a little bit. Bradley Sellers, fastest driver in Sector 2. So obviously drivers trying to find a little bit of breathing space, a little bit of speed out of the car. John Uyan in the Peugeot starting to look at Timon Subic with a very hungry eye as he senses an opportunity to go for an overtake. Matthew Overton having a think about Magnus Dahlgren in the background there as well, I noticed. So already, and into the wall, it's gone Matthew Overton. Matthew Overton's gone into the wall, and who's that that's gone with him?
I believe that's Magnus Dahlgren has gone with
literally
him.
just stationary, and now it's just causing a chain reaction. This is an absolute mess.
That is not what you want to see at all there. But yeah, incident with a couple of drivers, and they're stranded on track. They've got nowhere to go. They can't get out of the way. They've stopped dead, trying to allow people to go around, but there's just not enough space here at Long Beach for that to happen. So they had to get moving eventually, as we hear cut to a replay, and we'll see what goes on. As yeah, I cannot see what's going on in the replay, but yeah. That is not what we wanted in the first lap, but it's inevitable. And but yeah, one thing I want to say there is Bradley Sellers looked very, very racy in the early stages there, setting the fastest lap with a 14.4. I imagine we're going to see a lot more faster laps than that as we go on. But
the drivers that got caught out by it. It was Norm Graff and George Angelidis, and we've already got a retirement. It's Magnus Dahlgren. We've also got the BMW Vinicius de Oliveira out of the race, Alex. So it's already had 2 victims, nice and early.
Yes. With how the opening laps played out on this tight circuit, it's definitely something that we expected to see happen. So they just have to be smart, ring it back a little bit, and manage through.
So hopefully we're going to have another look at what it was that happened in the battle for positions. Oh, well, that's what it was. It was an absolute fail by Matthew Overton. Completely lost the car under braking, and unfortunately he went straight into the back of Magnus Dahlgren.
Yeah, Dahlgren's not going to be happy with that, but it's how easy mistakes can be made. He looks as though he thought he could brake a lot later, and the guy in front just braked that little bit sooner, and panic stations there for Overton as he desperately tried to dodge out of the way of the purple car in front, but wasn't able to do so, and that is an incident into turn 1. I don't know if that's going to result in a heftier penalty there because of that red zone, or whether just before turn 1 doesn't count. I'll have to refer to Alex's expertise for that one.
With that area, it is in our red zone. Right through turn 1 is the red zone, so there's definitely going to be a hefty penalty coming down on Matthew Overton for that. We put that red zone because that was the incident we didn't want to see happen, but you know, this is racing and things do happen. So hopefully throughout the remainder of this race, as we see there is some debris on the tracks, they'll have to manage through there, but hopefully with the remainder of this race we won't see that happen again.
Now hang on a minute, what's happened to Tom Lane? Where's Tom Lane gone? He's pitted already by the look of it. So Tom Lane has come into the pits within the first 5 minutes of racing. Now that is very dramatic. Why has Tom Lane come in so early?
It looks like he has a penalty. He did not go into the pit stop and served a drive-through penalty. I am not sure what for, but that definitely is going to hurt him.
Well, obviously there are a couple of drivers, I think, who have to serve penalties from previous races. They have to do so within the first 3 laps, I do believe. So maybe Tom Lane was one of those. No wonder he wanted to get a fast lap under his belt, because he knew he was going to have to serve a penalty early on in the race if that is the case. And now he's obviously got to try and fight back.
No penalty for Tom Lane before the race started, so unless he's got it this race, it did not exist beforehand. But we have some penalties there for B. Gant, G. Ribeiro, and seasonal probation there for G. Ribeiro as well. So he's twice on that on that list. That's not fortunate, but yeah, big problems there for Tom Lane. Then start off, going to have to get through not only a lot of traffic in his own class, but he's also got the traffic of the GT3s to deal with in the next lap or two as well.
So Tom Lane has exited the pits in 14th position as a result of all of that. Here are the leaders in GT. It's the 2 Mercedes cars, Sachin Sobes versus Johnny Gutierrez, and they are going to duel away for position. They've kept it nice and tidy for the time being, but that entry to the pits for Tom Lane has handed the lead to Wouter de Bruin. We thought it was all going to be Tom Lane all the way, and it turns out it's going to be Tom Lane fighting to get himself back into the lead again. And as he tries to make hay while the sun shines, Brad Sellers, fastest driver on track, 1 minute 11.427, the best lap of the race for him so far, as he tries to move his way further forward. But already George Angelidis and Matthew Overton have had to make pit stops. They have fallen to the back of the grid behind Larry Thomas and Brandon Gant in the GTs. Magnus Dahlgren and Vinicius de Oliveira out of the race. And I have to say, Magnus Dahlgren has every reason to feel frustrated. I think he's going to be quite irate with Matthew Overton in the Dark Thunder Porsche, who obviously got the braking zone very wrong indeed. Now here is Becky Ely making her bid to try and close up on and pass the Champion Racing Aston Martin of JT Tammy. And Becky Ely, what a revelation she's turned out to be in 2023, the Acura driver, really coming on strong. And here at Long Beach, she left her decent qualifying lap to the later part, but she's definitely looking pretty quick now, as Tom Lane is just banged in the fastest lap of the race at 1:11.2. So Tom Lane is definitely getting on with it.
Certainly is, yeah. We've got some information as to where he got that penalty from. He jumped the start, so that amazing start that he got, almost a second lead over the second car behind him, was because he jumped it. So that's where that penalty comes from. And now he's got a lot of work to do, and he looks like he's making short work of that, already setting the fastest lap, like you say. But I want to make a shout out there to Bradley Sellers, who's managed to set the fastest lap before that, and it's looking very racy there. Currently in P3 on the grid, and it looks like he's managed to make a move on Johnny Uyan there as well.
So already some exciting battles, as here come the leaders lapping the GTs. We did say, didn't we, that it was going to be in the early stages. To be fair, I thought it was going to be a little earlier into the race, but 7 laps completed and now we're in the back markers. I do wonder how much of that is Tom Lane having to take his penalty, and these guys obviously being a lot closer together in terms of their performance margin. I can tell you that Tom Lane in the Manta Squid has gone from being about 21 seconds back from the race leader to now being about 15, 16 seconds. So he has made up massively on that lap. He's done a 1:10.7, while Wouter de Bruin has done a 1:16.5, and that is, of course, by virtue of the fact that Wouter de Bruin and the leaders are in amongst the traffic. And I can tell you for a fact that Tom Lane is absolutely eating this racetrack. He is currently charging back into contention, and he is already on the back of Jason Whitehead's Ferrari, Alec. This is not going to be too long to get through past him if Tom Lane's got anything to say about it.
No, it is 22 seconds up to the leader right now, and Tom Lane is flying with the fastest lap on the track right now. He is trying to get through Jason Whitehead right now, which looks to be pretty easy. He's ducking to the inside, doesn't try to make the move there. It's good to be smart. But with the pace he has right now, if he can manage through the traffic, and as the more laps go by before he hits the back end of the traffic, as we see he's just about to hit it right now, the traffic will start to spread out, which hopefully will make it a little bit easier to manage through, so there won't be a big gaggle of cars, but it definitely will be difficult. But with the pace Tom has right now, wouldn't surprise me to see him work back to the front before the end of this race.
This is the thing, on a circuit like Longbeach, he's clearly faster than the 13 drivers in front of him, but where do you go for the overtakes? He's going to try and go round the outside of Jason Whitehead. Oh, that was masterful. Absolutely masterful. He used the cars in front of him, the GTs, to box Jason Whitehead in. And even though he wasn't able to lap the GTs, he forced Jason Whitehead's hand there. He had to back off the throttle. That was magnificent forethought by Tom Lane to read the situation and go, well, if I go right, Whitehead's got to go left and he's going to get held up. That was perfect. And that's the kind of manoeuvre, Stephen, that's going to save his bacon in this one.
Certainly is. That's the kind of thing that's going to get him back into contention. It's still a long way to go, of course. He's got through the traffic nice and cleanly there as well. But that was a masterstroke of predictions and racecraft there. It's got to be on the top of your game on your racecraft in a multi-class race like this. And he just predicted exactly what was going to happen there. Like you said, he picked his lane early, forced his rival into the opposite side, the left-hand side there to turn one, and that he's just, you know, guessed perfectly how that race was going to, how it was going to develop there, and already he's created a huge gap to Jason as well. So on the move is Tom Lane, and he's doing a stellar job so far.
Yeah, he's charging his way back. He's cutting through the field at the moment like a cat out of a bag. He's absolutely monstering his way through the field. Meanwhile, though, Timon Suvic is sensing a potential chance here to leapfrog past Wouter de Bruin in the Rookie Monsters BMW. All he's got to do is essentially go with him and stick to the back wing like glue. He might get his opportunity. Look, he's got a better line out of the previous corner. So he's just got to hang with Wouter de Bruin and look for a chance where he might be vulnerable. Through the left, you can see, look, the BMW is very twitchy, and this is very encouraging for the Acura. Timon Suvic, he's got to pick his moment though, again, because we've seen already a couple of gambles go horribly wrong. Look at Matthew Overton. You've got to be very patient trying to work your way back up through the field, and Timon Suvic, you know, they're going to use the traffic to good effect. They're going to try and pick their way through the GTs one by one. Look at the stopping difference. Timon Suvic able to gain a lot of ground on Wouter de Bruin, Alec, and this is all going to be about how balanced the Acura is going to be around this circuit in comparison to the BMW. Balance and a sort of an all-round car is essentially what you really need in these circumstances.
Yes, well, the Acura and the BMW are very, very similar in all of their characteristics. They handle very similarly, and a managed tire is about the same.
No,
as we see Wouter de Bruin make a
That's
spin.
horribly wrong, and look who's going to get past all of them. John Uyan is going to take the lead as de Bruin spins. Oh, he's gone into the wall himself. Oh my goodness, chaos, absolute chaos. And it's just caused an absolute chain reaction. Several cars now going spinning, losing the back end. That's the kind of incident that can completely throw a spanner in the works for everyone. I think only Wouter de Bruin and Bradley Sellers really got away without major incident. That was a chain reaction from the first incident. Look at that. Just all goes horribly wrong. Here's the incident. Look, there's just not enough room for John Uyan to negotiate there, as, well, just an absolute chain reaction. Disaster.
That is Longbeach. So that is Longbeach. What drama there. As yeah, big incident there at the sharp end as well, where you generally see a little bit more patience there. It looks as though the red car there just kind of squeezed the guy to the outside, and it did not work out for either of them. And yeah, this is where we get the drama in from Longbeach, and that means that we have a new leader. De Bruyne gets out through there quite unscathed there. Looks as though he got through all right. And Bradley Sellers, who had a bit of a moment a lap or two before that incident and cost him to lose a position to Uyan. And Uyan thought he was through. Uyan thought he had the lead. And then all of a sudden it all went wrong for him as well. And the concertina effect was huge there as a number of cars got involved. There'll be a number of people having to come in to maybe repair some damage or something along the lines. But De Bruyne is going to be absolutely over the moon with all of that. That's 3 out of 4 of his main rivals are gone out of this race. Tom Lane is also licking his lips at that as well. He's now up to P11, slowly making his way back up through the grid. And the more incidents that these guys at the front have, the more chance he's got to get back into this.
Absolutely. Bradley Sellers has got a good run in the draft here to close up on Wouter de Bruin, the 2 BMW drivers. But Bradley Sellers just decides discretion, the better part of valor. He bails out of the move as we line up the Mercedes of Johnny Gutierrez, which is now the leading GT. And that's a big change because obviously it was Sachin Sobes at one point in the race, and now Johnny Gutierrez is getting out of the way. This is not good news. That this has really hampered Bradley Sellers. Sellers, who was looking at the lead and potentially trying to take it away from Wouter de Bruin a short while ago. He drops the ball there, being stuck behind Johnny Gutierrez just a little bit too long, and now Timon Suvic has got his chance to move forward, and it's not a million miles away from possibility that Alexander Schultz and the other Acura may get a run on these two as well. But that chain reaction really has changed everything in this race, hasn't it? And you just get the sense there that just the eyes were wider than the stomach to a certain extent for John Uyan. That's really affected the CMS Peugeot's balance and handling. He's now dropped all the way to 14th, and the car just doesn't seem to be giving him anything anymore. He's going to have to come in for repairs, I think, to get himself back up to speed.
Yes,
but
John
all of that,
is
Tom Lane is now in 9th position. Bradley Sellers P2. Still struggling to fend off from Timon Suvic, who's got another good run on him.
I have to say there as well, that was more brilliant racecraft from Wouter de Bruin, getting past the GT3 car, the Mercedes there into turn 1, and left Sellers stranded. He couldn't make the same move. He would have been sending a real dive on the GT3 car had he gone for it. GT3 car, the Mercedes did what he was meant to do. Gutierrez in that car did what he was meant to do. He stayed predictable, but it was just a perfectly timed pass from De Bruyne to extend his lead at the front there and put Sellers into trouble. And that's the kind of thing that you kind of see in these multi-class races. Who can make that move? Who can be aggressive? Bruyne showed that he's got what it takes to make that kind of move stick.
So 2 big incidents then in the opening 15 minutes of racing, Alec, and this is the kind of thing that's really going to change the face of racing. We're already a quarter of a way through the 60 minutes, and we've already seen big drama up amongst the leaders, but this is all going to benefit the patient, and the most patient out there at the moment does appear to be Tom Lane.
Yes, Tom Lane is just working his way through the field, already up to P9, still running some of the fastest laps coming through traffic. So he's definitely going to come back into this. But with these incidents that we've seen so far, it's just everyone being a little too antsy, and we talked about that. You have to keep a level head through the opening laps of this race, just because of how chaotic it is. And as we saw, it bought a lot of people and caused some big accidents. So hopefully now, once we get into the groove of everything, everyone could just calm it down, take a breath, and just start to manage.
With Tom Lane closing up on the Cadillac of Guillermo Benchka by a massive amount. Tom Lane has clearly got the red mist. He's very angry about how he's been given a jump start penalty. He may not necessarily agree with it, but you can't really dwell on it. You just got to take it, you've got to serve it, you've got to throw it with the punches, and now you've got to find your way back. But he's got time. The gap between him and the race leader is 27 seconds, but having worked his way up to 9th position, Tom Lane's got to be very patient all the way through the race. Yes, but he's got time to close up on De Bruyne and Sellers, who have obviously... De Bruyne has obviously taken, I think, a little bit of damage as a result of his incident earlier on. And I don't think that this is done yet for Tom Lane. I think him being in 9th position, he can easily make the podium. There's a very good chance he could still win this from where he currently is. And that's going to be an incredible performance, Stephen, when you consider that it looked pretty much over at one stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's only saving grace is that the drive-through came so early on. And yeah, his patience, other than the start, has proven to be working for him so far. But there's a long way to go, and there's a lot of cars in front of him still as well. He's got to not only be as quick as he possibly can throughout each lap, which he's doing very well, setting fastest laps at the moment. But he's got to do so while making overtakes in a very difficult track to overtake, and each one of those overtakes is increasing the chances of him being involved in an incident that he doesn't want more and more each time. So there's still a lot to play for, but he's certainly not out of it just yet. But it all depends. Coming into the last 15 minutes of the race, we'll see where he's at then. And yeah, so far he's losing time to the leaders since the drive-through occurred. So he's staying in touch, and that's all he needs to do at this stage. He needs to be patient and controlled in his overtakes, and just make sure that he's getting past these guys with minimal incident.
And this is the tricky factor of the race now, Alec, because obviously Tom Lane has had to work his way through the traffic of not just the GTs, but also his fellow hypercar drivers. He's got through the drivers that would probably have not given him too much of a hard time. But now look, he's in the top 10. He's with drivers like Guillaume Benchka, like Ross Smith in front of him, like Philippe Enrique. These are not slow drivers. This is where Tom Lane's really going to have to take a couple of risks, take a gamble, roll the dice, and try to outbrake these guys. Up to the inside line on Guillaume Benchka. You've got to go for it. You can't afford to sit behind him for too long. And this is where Tom Lane could really lose this race. He's got through the drivers that are relatively easy, Alec, but now he's up against the big guns, and he needs to fight back.
Yes, this is the point now for Tom, and it's scary to do, especially around Long Beach, but you have to take a lot of risk. You have to make that dive bomb. So he just needs to be smart when doing it so he doesn't force himself into a mistake and have some more problems. But for right now, it's all out, foot to the floor, take the risk, take the gamble, because you basically have to. And he's looking to the inside, coming through here. He's going to try and make the move, but Guilherme Benke closes back in on him as they go down the straight. Man, that was some close racing, and this is an awesome battle.
This is threading the eye of the needle at over 100 miles an hour, and now finally he gets his man, but the back end's going to rotate. He caught that very nicely. Guillaume Benchka under no pressure at all, and under no illusion that Tom Lane is fighting back with gusto and determination. So Tom Lane gets away with that for the time being, but oh, goodness me, he really is having to push the limits of what he is prepared to do, and that's really tricky, and that's going to be the deciding factor of this race, Stephen. We've got 40 minutes to go, and essentially Tom Lane has wasted 5 minutes trying to get past Norm Graf.
Yeah, but I think he maybe made the right decision there. I feel as though he didn't go for the dive into turn 1, knowing that that's the red zone, and if he just makes one slight error, misjudgment, he had to be 100% sure he was going to make that dive work. And if you're sending it from a car length back or so, you're never 100% sure at all. So he's waited, he's bided his time, and he's got the turn, the move done down into East Seaside Way, which is was fantastic move. You've got to say he definitely outdid the guy in front on the brakes there, and made it work brilliantly, you've got to say. And now he's off to the next guy, but he's doing what he needs to do at this stage. He's keeping it clean, and long may that continue. But he no longer has the fastest lap. That's now gone to Bradley Sellers, who's currently fighting for back on Huda to fight for the lead, which is proving to be an interesting battle.
So it looks as though we've had another retirement. Mike Olsen is on the sidelines, as is Vinicius Gonçalves. So we've had a couple of extra retirements, and let's have a look at the replay of what happened. And we're going to see what happened to Vinicius Gonçalves. Oh, there it was. And that's quite a hefty whack for a GT driver. That probably has completely destroyed the suspension geometry. So there's no way Vinicius Gonçalves can survive that one. It's a big hit at a rather awkward angle of the car as well. Now, Wouter de Bruyn in the traffic of the GTs. This has benefited Bradley Sellers quite considerably, because Wouter de Bruyn is now less than a second ahead of him, and this has really compromised Timon Suvic. Now again, we've seen this, haven't we, as drivers try to realise, look, that guy in front of me is the race leader, and he's been held up, so now I can catch him. But again, you just can't rush it. You've got like 2 or 3 corners where it all goes well, and then it all settles itself out again, and this is the problem, Alec. Drivers get eyes wider than their stomach. They get too hungry and they go for moves that aren't there. Yellow in the sector, so it looks as though we've had another driver drop it.
Yeah, as we see, that's Matthew Overton right there coming through the fountain area. That's going to be tricky for everyone to manage. He's going to have to wait for the whole field to go by before he can turn it around. But yes, having your eyes wider than your stomach, you have to be smart with the moves that you make. And as we look at the replay here of Matthew, he gets into the wall again on turn 1. And it's coming through the fountain area. I don't see... Oh, just
There it
loses
is.
the rear end in the fountain. Does a good job of trying to pull forward to get out of the driving line, but still it's going to make it really tricky for everyone else behind.
It's a very long day for Matthew Overton, and he actually gets clipped there on the front nose. That shouldn't cause too much damage because that was at low speed. But even so, it's raining and it's pouring for Matthew Overton and the crew. Now, Wouter de Bruin in front of Bradley Sellers to the tune of 1.5 seconds now. Timon Suvic ahead of Alexander Schultz, who's trying to stay with these three drivers up front as much as possible. And into the pits comes Suvic. Right, Suvic's decided enough of this. I'm going to be the first one to blink. Now, this could be valuable for Timon Suvic because there is a little bit of traffic coming up towards them. If he can get into a little bit of clean air and go on these fresh tyres and really start to catch up to the drivers in front, the tables could turn here, and it could be the Acura that gets out in front of the BMWs.
Very unfortunate there as well. We saw that incident with Vinicius Gonçalves just getting a bit out of shape in the fountain. It seems to be taking a lot of prisoners at that fountain section there, which is why we've got the red flag zone through there as well. But once you've made that crash there as well, there's nothing kind of stopping it. Got to kind of stay still as best you can, but that doesn't always help as drivers are coming into a very tight sector. There's not a lot of space to go around. And it can start to lead to concertina effects, but also the GT3 there kind of crashing, getting it out of the way extremely well there, you've got to say. Like, after hitting that barrier on the outside of turn 1, did a very good job to force the car further into that barrier and not let it jump out into the track in front of others, because there was a number of cars coming through there who wouldn't have been able to get out of the way. Yeah, interesting so far, the race.
Oh. Goodness me!
What a miss.
Was that Bradley Sellers? That was frightening. Absolutely frightening. He's going through the GT3 AM lead battle. That's Max Sunthornlap and Brendan McVeigh. And that is a scary moment for Max Sunthornlap. He's going quite close to the pit wall. I do not imagine for one moment, Alec, that he expected to see a BMW to his right.
No, that is definitely scary. That move was... Oh! As we see Mark Sunlap make a little bit of wall contact right there. But yes, that was scary. Very close racing. The guys are taking a lot of risk right now, so it's definitely something that they're going to have to manage.
So yeah, Max Sunthornlap did go into the wall there, the race leader in GT3 AM, and that's really damaged the car big time. He did not look like he got a decent purchase through the left-hander on the previous run, and I would keep an eye on Max Sunthornlap's car. Look at that. Oh, he's got a real crabbing issue there. The steering wheel is off-center after that, and that can be a real headache, Stephen, because you're desperately trying to nail these apexes, and now you're having to deal with a steering column, essentially, that is absolutely skewed. He's going to have to come into the pits earlier than planned.
And there he goes, and it makes things extremely awkward and difficult. Happened to me in a GT3 race on iRacing a couple of days ago, where I had some damage there, and I had one lap to go, and it means that you've got to be thinking on the fly very quickly and adjusting to what the car is telling you and what the force feedback is telling you. You no longer go by any of those muscle memory things that you've learned for the last week and a half or however long you've been practicing for. They're all out of the window, and it's down to just you, driver and machine, and you've got to get it right, because if one mistake and then you're not going again at all, because it's so easy once your steering rod's bent like that to slam it into the wall even harder and make another mistake. We saw that with one of the Hypercars after he clipped the tyre barrier into turn 1. It becomes very difficult to handle the car. He could not get on the power without it spinning around on him. Then he was stranded in fountain.
Brad Sellers has come into the pits on this lap, so the man who was in second position has come in, and so too has Jason Whitehead in the Ferrari, incidentally. Timon Suvic having already pitted, so this is going to be an interesting one to see where Suvic comes out in relation to Bradley Sellers. Has Sellers maintained his position in front of Timon Suvic, or is he going to fall behind him? Because that's going to be quite critical for the battle for the race later. So looks as though we've got in third position Wayne Hutchison, the man who is currently leading in Hypercar AM. There he is, currently leading the way in the category, but third overall at present, largely because he's kept himself out of trouble, but also because there's a few drivers around him that have already started pitting. So Whitehead has pitted, John Uyan obviously had his incident earlier on, as did George Angelidis. Brad Sellers and Timon Suvic are both pitted as well. So just by staying out of harm's way, Wayne Hutchison is third overall and is currently leading the Hypercar AM category as well. So that definitely plays into his hands. And the Porsche driver still doing a fair job and still keeping it nice and tidy out there on the course, not getting into hot water. But this is perfect news for Brendan McVeigh, isn't it? Having watched his main rival there, Max Sunderlap, going into the wall, this definitely gives a little bit of breathing space to the Porsche driver, Brendan McVeigh, who is currently 18th overall and already 2 laps down. Goodness me, this shows you just how short the circuit is here at Long Beach, California. But Brendan McVeigh, oh, it's a spin right in front, and all 3 of them go around. That's how easy it can happen. Brendan McVeigh somehow gets away with it.
Wow, that was very close, very lucky. Brendan's going to lose a little bit of time to Matt Boost behind him, but man, that was close. That looked to be Norm Graff, who spun in front, and that caused the other GT car to make contact. But definitely tricky as we're getting down to these later stages of the race.
So it was Thomas in the McLaren spinning. He went straight into the side of the Hypercar, and there was very little anybody could do about it. And Larry Thomas is going to be sick to his stomach about that one.
We've said it before, we'll say it again. The tricky nature of Long Beach means that if the guy around you makes a mistake, there's not a lot of space for you to avoid that. And there's another person getting caught up in an incident not of their making, and it's causing real problems up and down the field here. But yeah, interesting one there for the Hypercar AM series as well, as that Wayne Hutchinson has yet to stop. The other 2 guys in that series have stopped as well, so he's in P3 at the moment just by virtue of staying out, like you say. But those kind of incidents, we're probably going to see more of them, especially in an hour-long race. As the longer it goes on, the more tired you get, the more difficult it is to keep that focus. And things do not stop here at Long Beach. It is 1 lap after the next, 1 corner after the next. There's always something going on in front of you. There's not like you've got any breathers here whatsoever. This track is relentless.
Now, we're watching Tom Lane, and obviously, as it says on the graphic there, he's up to 4th position in the Hypercar Pro category, 5th overall, as into the pits in front comes Alexander Schultz, I think that was, going into the pits. But let's shake hands with Ronnie Reel here, because Tom Lane has still got to make a pit stop himself. You know, he is fighting his way back, but he made a penalty earlier on, not a pit stop. So he is still going to have to try and pick when he's going to make his scheduled pit stop. So Tom Lane has obviously still got a long way to go to find himself back into contention. He's about half a minute behind Wouter de Bruin. That's how much the penalty cost him. So he's obviously looking good to be in the rostrum at the moment for Hypercar Pro, but there are still a few drivers that have pitted, and Tom Lane is not one of them, Alex. So this is a great performance from him to fight back, and he's obviously worked his way through a lot of the traffic. But if we're actually looking at this from a realistic point of view, as De Bruin and Schultz both come into the pits from 1st and 2nd, Tom Lane has still got to make a pit stop as well.
Yes, with Walter de Bruin and basically our top 3 right now are in the pits. Tom Lane still needed to make a pit stop. We'll see what he does here. He may end up trying to go another lap longer. Oh, nope, he ducks into the pits right here. So with these guys, though, hitting the 30-minute mark, they'll be able to make it on 1 stop. So this pit stop should be the only stop they have. They may need to fuel save a little bit more. But how Tom can manage it could put him back up in the front, but we'll just have to see how much pace he'll have after this stop.
Fastest lap still currently belongs to Bradley Sellers, though, as well. But Tom Lane with a 10.79, it's not showing up as the fastest lap. I wonder whether or not that's because he's gone out of bounds there or so. But he is still in contention with this. But you're seeing there that 30-second gap that we saw earlier for Tom Lane to the leader is growing as time goes on, because he's having to kind of navigate traffic and make overtakes, which he maybe get a few for free here in the pits, as he's fastest man on track at the moment. It's still causing him to drop off the leaders. So Wouter de Bruin is laughing at the moment, and seems to have got the jump over Schultz, who's now in P5. Bradley Sellers done very well to get himself back up into P3. Brian Hall currently leading the race, but still needs to pit.
Yes, it's a really tight battle up front, as we see. Brian Hall should be coming in for a pits on this lap, but it is really close to see Walter de Bruin be able to get a little bit more of a gap as he came out of the pits. we'll have to just see how it plays out. As we see Brian Hall actually able to go another lap, and that'll be better for Brian Hall. The longer he can go on this front stint, with him having to make his pit stop, he'll be able to go full push all the way to the end, so won't have any fuel saving. So hopefully it looks like he may be able to get on a fresh set of tires, go full push to the end, and make up some time.
So Ross Smith just trying to negotiate his way through in the noon Acura, and the man right in front of him is Alexander Schultz. So Ross Smith is actually one of the drivers that's gained quite significantly here through the pit stops. He hasn't gained position, but what he has done is gain momentum. He's right in behind Alexander Schultz now, and Schultz is going to get held up by a GT. So this is going to be good opportunism potentially in the offing for Ross Smith if he can run in the draft. But look how far in front Timon Suvic is. It's not much, is it? There is a very tight battle still raging for the final couple of steps of the podium, because Wouter de Bruin is going to take the net lead back again once Brian Hall makes his pit stop. But Bradley Sellers is still hanging on in front of Wayne Hutchison, who is now in front of Suvic, Schultz and Smith. So Wayne Hutchison looking for an overall podium, but now that you've got Suvic, Schultz and Smith all very close together, and who's behind them? Well, Tom Lane. So Tom Lane is about 5 seconds up the road. There's still all to play for the podium positions here, and I think, Stephen, we are going to still have to have a few wild moments before we really find out who the identity of the third man on the podium behind De Bruin and Sellers is going to be.
Yeah, there's certainly still a lot of racing still to be had, but what a race Wayne Hutchinson is having here. Putting that Hypercar AM so high up on the grid is testament to his patience and skill so far, and just keeping it clean. This is what these street races are all about. He's kept it clean, he's kept it out of trouble. We haven't seen him get held up too much by any of the GT3 cars either in the course of this race, and it's proving it to be in good step. But he now has a couple of people behind him who are going to be less forgiving in terms of where they're going to make the move and how aggressive they're going to be with those passes. They want to get past, they want that podium place. They're competing for championship points, and every position is going to make a big difference in terms of that championship. But Buda now has a sizable gap, 15 seconds I'm seeing there, to Bradley Sellers. So he's come out of the pit stop window smelling like roses, and it's gone all his way. Now he's got some breathing space, and the pressure is just lifted off him a little bit to kind of make the moves as and when he wants around those GT3 cars, and not be too worried about getting held up.
Yeah, that's the key factor, isn't it, for Wouter de Bruin? He can just be patient in the traffic now with that little bit of breathing space. But check this out. We've got Suvic, Schultz, Smith. 3 drivers battling for 4th position behind Wayne Hutchison, who is about another 7 to 8 seconds up the road from this. And Alexander Schultz has been waiting quite patiently behind Timon Suvic for the man in front to make a mistake. And now Alexander Schultz is basically giving Timon Suvic all of the pressure in the world. Look at that! You really got to be careful that the car doesn't snap away from you at that point. You turn in, you brake, you get a little bit early on the throttle. The back end of the car starts to slide around a lot at that particular point. So this is where Alexander Schultz needs to be quite responsive and stay as close to Timon Suvic as possible. But look, you can't give that big a gung-ho up the inside line into turn 2. You've got to yield, and that's exactly what Alexander Schultz found himself having to do. Advantage Ross Smith, because now Ross Smith has a chance here to close himself further up into the fray. So Suvic, Schultz, Ross Smith, 3 drivers still battling over 4th position. Wouter de Bruin and Bradley Sellers, the 2 BMW drivers, in 1st and 2nd place at this point. Wayne Hutchison, the leader in the Hypercar AM category, 3rd position, now dropping about 10 seconds back from Bradley Sellers. And then the battle we're watching on track at the moment, Suvic, Schultz and Smith dueling over 4th position. Brian Hall is in 7th place, and the man behind him is Tom Lane in the Manta Squid Porsche. And we are running out of time. Yellow in sector 1. That's not good, but it's removed pretty quickly. No, it's back again. So yellow in sector 1. That says to me a driver may well have dropped it on the approach to the fountain, or maybe even in the fountain. So we are looking at the duel for positions in the G. Stephen Miller in the McLaren, who is currently causing a bit of a headache to the BMW up front. Wouter de Bruin gets through, and Stephen Miller now in 4th position, trying to chase down Matt Boyce. We're going to see a replay of what happened then a little further around, as into the pit lane with an issue. Is that Guillermo Benchka? Guillermo Benchka slow into the pits, I think. And then we're looking at Stephen Miller and Eugene Mazur. Stephen Miller's going to overshoot, and that's exactly what brought up the yellow flags at Sector 1.
Done extremely well there, you've got to say, to get the car stopped without incident, but then it looks as though he did get into an incident there as he came back on. Just planted there in the barrier on the outside there. We've seen a couple of people go off and make contact with that barrier. Were this real life, that would be a red flag situation to repair that barrier, I imagine. But fantastic racing so far, and we're seeing the big difficulty here with multi-class racing is, in order to set up a move with a difficult to overtake track, you have to follow very closely for a number of laps or corners at least, and these GT3 cars and the traffic are interrupting that flow very often here. So we saw that there with Schultz and Subic as well. Now a gap between them caused by a GT3 car. If you can get the move done at the last moment into turn 1 and leave the guy you're fighting with stranded behind, they've got no real recourse there to come back at you, and that means that you can then start running away with the gap if you've got the pace. If you don't have the pace, or if they can stay close to you and get around the traffic with you, it's very hard to drop them because of the nature of the track. But this is where that masterful racecraft comes into play. Not only are you fighting this very difficult circuit and the walls, you're also having to deal with GT3 cars and trying to plan your moves far in advance. You're trying to predict exactly where you're going to catch them, exactly where you can make the move, and if you can't get that send on one of the GT3 cars and leave your rival stranded behind them, that is proving to be a very powerful tool here.
21 minutes still to go in the 60 minutes of Long Beach, California, and it is a very tough run all the way to the finish. Jake Sanson, Stephen Carabelis and Alec King with you here in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship, brought to you courtesy of Stormgang Simulation and Champion Motorsports. This is a very tricky one, and already we've had several lead changes. Wouter de Bruin and Bradley Sellers are 1 and 2 in the BMW hybrids. Wayne Hutchison, the leader in the AM category, 3rd overall. Very patient drive from him so far, staying out of harm's way throughout. Timon Subic battling with the elements, along with Alexander Schultz and Ross Smith in tow. Brian Hall, 7th position, dueling currently with Tom Lane, the man who got pole position by almost a second and then had a jump start penalty. So Tom Lane trying to fight his way back into contention once again by working his way through on Brian Hall. Those two are currently battling for 7th place. John Uyan, who led for about 12 centimetres at one point, managing to cannon into the wall, not leaving his combatant any space at all. I think it might even have been Wouter de Bruin that he was battling with at that point. And somehow Wouter de Bruin managed to get away with it, but John Uyan essentially closing the door on him and threw himself into the wall in the process. Tom Lane, by the way, has actually overtaken Brian Hall, so he has managed to get through on that lap, and that means that Tom Lane's next target is Alexander Schultz, and there are the two of them, with Schultz having dropped back now behind Subic and Smith. I'm not sure what happened there to Alexander Schultz, but he's certainly lost a lot of ground and now finds himself in a really tough situation as Tom Lane is trying to work his way further forward up to the inside line. Tom Lane's got to go for it. This is going to be a brave manoeuvre, and Alexander Schultz hits the wall as a result. That's the kind of risk that's paid off for Tom Lane. It's all gone horribly wrong for Alexander Schultz.
That's going to be a tough one to call penalty-wise as well, because the guy, he sent it up the inside. There was no contact between the cars, but it looked like Schultz just got terrified of the move there, trying to give him too much space.
We told it was Brian Hall.
Brian Hall.
We actually told it was Brian Hall rather than Alexander Schultz. I do apologise.
Yeah, my apologies as well, but he's gone a bit wide there, clattered into the wall there, and then Tom Lane just says thank you very much and went through. But Schultz is still P5 as it stands, and Tom Lane gets another position. But we're seeing how effective that drive-through penalty was for him. It's running out of time now for him to get back into contention with the really fast guys. And once he catches up to the likes of Ross Smith and Alexander Schultz, who's fighting with Subic at the moment, then it's going to become a lot more difficult to get past. Another thing worth mentioning here at this stage as well is that Bradley Sellers has managed to close the gap from about 15 seconds to about 6 seconds in very short order. He's currently lapping 2 to 3 seconds quicker a lap than Wouter de Bruin. Wouter de Bruin, with some damage maybe, is struggling to get that car home. He's going to try and nurse it back, and if Bradley does catch him, he needs to defend that position for all his worth. But there was a lap there a couple of laps ago where he was 4 seconds a lap faster than his main rival in P1, so there could be something hotting up there for the lead still.
A very fair shout, and looking at the lap times as well, Alec, between Wouter de Bruin and Bradley Sellers, there is about 0.4 of a second difference between them per sector never mind per lap. So this is a very tricky situation for Wouter de Bruin to be in. And of course, although they're both in BMWs, they're not in the same team, are they? So this is going to be an interesting one. Bradley Sellers is going to take absolutely no prisoners at all in his attempts to catch and pass Wouter de Bruin.
Well, actually, Walter de Bruin and Bradley Sellers are actually on the same team. They are on Team Rookie Monsters, so a little bit of rivalry going on in between them too for Bradley trying to reel him in. But last time he was a second faster in the first sector, so this is definitely going to start playing out. Bradley clearly has the pace and is trying to close the gap as much as he can, and he's pulling a gap every single lap. Last lap around, Walter de Bruin did a 1:14.0 and Bradley Sellers did a 1:12.5. So Bradley Sellers is the fastest car on the track at the moment. So very, very close. It's going to come down to the wire as we have about 16 minutes left in this race. Bradley is on the charge, taking all the risk he can to close in the time, and is really just incredible to watch.
Yeah, Bradley Sellers really running the gauntlet as he tries to lap traffic, both in Hypercar Ram and in GT. As he splits them down the middle. That is a very brave manoeuvre from Bradley Sellers, but he knows what he wants to do in this race. He's got to be very hopeful that Gilles Lalonde behind him in the Peugeot bails out, which he does. He bails out. Oh! Bradley Sellers goes into the wall!
Oh, that was very, very hard to watch. That looked like slow motion as the back end just stepped out and clattered that barrier there, that tyre barrier on turn 1. Jotting out into the racetrack there has caught out so many people, just carrying a little bit too much speed there into turn 1, not getting the trail braking right, and that could be the end of his charge for P1, but there's still some time to go. Also has some damage to his car as well, and maybe he's got away with that. Maybe he hasn't damaged the steering too badly. Maybe he's going to be able to still fight this one back, but fantastic racing here. Shows kind of how much he's pushing there, Sellers, and how much on edge and near the limit he is willing to get in order to catch up and maybe win this race. It goes around the outside between turns 9 and 10 of a GT3 car as well. It's worth noticing as well, giving a shout out to Gutierrez. Johnny Gutierrez in the GT3 class there has got a commanding lead of the lead there as well. About 18 seconds ahead of the next man, so he's doing a fantastic job in the lower class.
Yes, indeed. Johnny Gutierrez essentially keeping it nice and tidy throughout the course of this race so far, and definitely giving himself the box seat. But Bradley Sellers working himself into a crescendo, trying to close up on Wouter de Bruin. Again, Alec, is that just a sense of, you know, you get it, maybe a little bit excited, a little bit eager for anticipation of catching him? You know, I'm definitely faster, I'm definitely chipping away, I can definitely catch him. And it just catches you out because you feel so much confidence, so much speed in the car that you just carry it a little bit too much into the apex.
Yes, definitely with Bradley. Longbeach is one of those circuits where it's a very small room for error. So you can make the mistakes very easily, and as we clearly saw that with Bradley, he just pushed the car a little bit too fast. So, and that's just the characteristics of this track. You know, you can be the fastest car on track, but at what cost? And it seems to have cost him a little bit. The gap hasn't really been able to gone down as much. It's about 7 seconds still. But he is trying to close in. As I look at their lap times last lap around, Walter de Bruin was actually faster. So clearly that little incident has hindered Bradley a little bit, and traffic isn't helping as Bradley has gotten a little bit more traffic on that last lap. But just you have to be smart. You know, with only about 14 minutes left in this race, you just want to manage. Yes, you may be faster, but don't overdo it. You want to still be able to finish this race. So we'll have to see what they can do. Bradley seems to have calmed it down a little bit. He's closed the gap actually a little bit more, now at about 6 seconds.
And it looks as though Schultz is out of spin. Schultz has spun it, and that is disastrous in his duel with Ross Smith and Timon Suvic. Suvic seems to have dropped back as well. So I don't think it's just Schultz that's had an incident. I think Suvic has been involved as well, because Schultz has gone around, but Suvic has dropped back too.
Looks like Schultz's rear wing is gone as well, so he's pit for repairs or maybe to retire the car as well. So that's going to be very difficult to control with no rear wing. But that promotes Paul Lane even higher, who's on a comeback charge and a half. Sorry, Tom Lane. Apologies there. It's so now P5 after that drive-through penalty for a jump start in front. But Ross Smith now as well, he's going to have a battle on his hands with Tom Lane, who he must know he's quicker as well. He's seen this man on the pole position, and now he sees him in his rearview mirrors, and that is going to cause the heartbeats to increase for sure. He knows he's got somebody who is going to be aggressive, making a move. He goes to the defensive on the inside there, coming into turn 9, I believe it is, and down into turns 10 and 11, and he's putting his nose up the inside, but Tom Lane backs out of it. And fantastic racing here, but Ross Smith not giving this up easy. He knows he's quicker. He knows he has to defend for his life. And now down into turn 1, is Tom Lane going to be able to make that dive into turn 1? It's going to have to be spot on because of that red zone in there as well. Is he going to go for it? It looks like defensive move there from Ross, and that means he's probably going to hold on to it, but he's going to go around the outside. Does he get it done? Yes, he does. Fantastic move there by Tom Lane. What fantastic racing. Round the outside. Chooses the brave option. And it looked like Ross Smith maybe gave it up, or maybe he just braked a little bit too hard, trying not to cause that incident. And that red zone is in the back of people's minds. You can see that here. As people go into turn 1, they are desperate not to get one of those penalties. But Tom Lane, with the big bravery move there, going around the outside. Fantastic racing.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, Stephen. I think that was purely a case of Ross Smith just looking at that incident from Tom Lane going up the inside and thinking, do you know what, he might overcook that, he might put that in the wall, so I'm just going to bail out a little bit earlier and see what happens. But as a result, Timon Suvic is now going to get his run to come back up the inside. Now that's Timon Suvic to unlap himself, I should point out, because he's been into the pits for a second visit. So Timon Suvic, they obviously didn't quite get the strategy right, and he's had to come in for a second pit stop rather than go all the way on the one. And that just shows you those drivers that have been able to extend it up to 30 minutes for when they came in for the pits. Those are the drivers that have managed to make it work in their favour. Now Becky Ely is yet again having a solid run as she now leads the GT3 AM category, I do believe. I know she leads. Yeah, she does. Yeah, she does lead the GT3 AM category. My apologies. It's Johnny Gutierrez who leads the GT3 Pro category. So Becky Ely has been working her way forward very carefully, has got herself into a lead position once again. This is another very mature drive from Becky Ely. We haven't seen much of her in the race, but that's to her credit because she hasn't been overdriving the car, Alec. She's just been keeping her head while all about are losing theirs, as Rudyard Kipling would have put it.
Yes, Becky has been driving a great race, hasn't had any incidents. That's why we haven't really been able to talk about her, but she's been putting in a great ride, just been driving level-headed, really smart, and has been running a really great race so far. So super happy to see her. She's coming around some lap traffic. She has a really good staking hand on this race, but I actually want to cut away for a second as Bradley Sellers is back in the pits. There was another incident there, and he lost about 30 seconds before he went into the pits, and is in the pits now. So definitely it looks to be he is out of contention for winning this race, and that is so terrible to see as he had such a good car, and definitely going to make it even more difficult for the championship.
That promotes Tom Lane back to the podium. What a comeback from that man there after being so far down. I believe he was down to P14, 15 after that drive-through in the very early stages.
Bradley Sellers in the pits. Bradley Sellers in pit road.
Yes.
Now, what's happened here? So we're watching Bradley Sellers as he's been absolutely hammered into the hairpin. Any chance Bradley Sellers had of the win is now well and truly put to bed.
Yeah, that is not what you want to see. That is Felipe Enrique, I believe. That is gone into the backside of him there, into the hairpin. He is not going to be a happy man at all, is Mr. Sellers. He was running very well in P2. And yeah, Enrique ends up in the grass, going across the trees. Takes out a couple of spectators there as well. I imagine that it's going to be a sizable penalty coming his way for that one. But no consolation to Bradley Sellers, who is now out of contention. He's now down to P10, maybe out of the race altogether, as he moves Tom Lane back into P3. And Wayne Hutchinson, who's managed to keep himself clean throughout, is currently in P2 in the AM series as well. Overall, he's up there with beating the majority of the pro drivers. So that is some phenomenal drive from Hutchinson there, keeping his nose clean. And he's had the pace as well. His last lap was a 12.8, the same as Tom Lane's. So he's been up there on merit as well, keeping it clean. And this is the nature of street circuit racing. Anybody can finish anywhere, and anything can go wrong at any time. Just ask Bradley Sellers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bitter disappointment for Bradley Sellers. A great chance to win this. As long as he just kept his head and stayed close to Wouter de Bruin, he had a great shot at the victory, but it's all fallen apart in the closing 10 minutes of this race here at Long Beach, California. The Virtual World Sports Car Championship brought to you by Champion Motorsports and Storm Gang Simulations. Jake Sanson, Stephen Carabelas and Alec King with you right to the finish. And Alec, this is when, you know, drivers feel like they've got themselves into a decent rhythm. There's only a handful of minutes to go, but mistakes come at any time, and now things are going to get serious out there. Look at Wayne Hutchison. So much flotsam and jetsam to dodge.
Yes, with only about 7 minutes or so left in this race, this time you just want to be safe. You just want to bring it home. You know, the gaps are so big to the guys behind him now as everything's sprayed out across some of the classes. There are some cars who are still battling for position, but for the guys who have themselves in a really good position with a good hand on this race, like Walter De Bruyn and Wayne Hutchinson, just manage. Just play it safe, get through the end, try and manage the traffic, don't cause another big incident. Oh, as we see, we have a car around there going into the fountain section. It looks like that was Mark Suntlap in our GT3 AM class. I don't know what position he was in before that, but that is definitely something you do not want to see. Oh, it just looks like he went a little wide there.
Yeah. Is this going to be the overshoot? He nearly goes straight into the back of the Porsche of James Bowders. That was very terrifying indeed for Max Suntlap. So he was lucky to get away from that one. But I was going to point out at this stage in proceedings, actually, Alec, that Wayne Hutchison being in second position, this is quite extraordinary because he is in the Hypercar AM category. And for him to be second overall, it's worth pointing out who's the driver in second place in the Hypercar AM? Guillermo Benchka, who is all the way down in 14th overall. That's how impressive it is that Wayne Hutchison has just kept his nose clean throughout.
Yes, Wayne Hutchison.
I was going to say, three lap difference there between Benchia and Hutchinson as well. So huge difference. He's got no pressure from behind in his class at all. Apologies for interrupting now.
Oh no, it's fine. Yes, no, Wayne Hutchison has just had a really flawless race. You know, we haven't really been able to talk to him about it much just because he's kept his nose clean, he's put it through, and as we see, that's what it takes to have a good finish. Wayne Hutchinson is in an AM class, but he's just had such a clean race. He hasn't had any incidents. He's all the way up and into P2, and you have to think that how many other drivers could have been up there had they not had any of those incidents. So a lot of the incidents that had happened were because of another driver causing contact, but if you can keep your nose clean and manage through and be smart, you can put yourself into a top finishing position, not even on pace, just by staying clean.
Now, Tom Lane finds himself in 5th position overall, 4th in the category, as he tries to close back up on Brian Hall. So Tom Lane still having a very tough run of it. He was actually the slowest of Ross Smith, Brian Hall and himself in the first sector. So I think Tom Lane has had an incident somewhere because he was running in 3rd overall at one stage and now he finds himself behind Smith and Hall again. He's not been in the pits again and his last lap was a 1:31. So I think Tom Lane has had another big incident somewhere. And look at the car. It is an absolute pig to drive. It's sliding around like a drunk dad at a wedding on roller skates. He's really struggling to get that car stopped and turned in, Alec, and this is absolutely a hammer blow for Tom Lane. He's already had to fight all his way back to 3rd position, but he's not even going to take that.
Yes, no, it does look like he has another incident. Looking at the car, he does have some damage on the right side of the car, so it's definitely something that you didn't want to see happen. He was so fast. He had the fastest lap in this race and overall had the best pace. But like we said, just these incidents with the traffic that happened here today, it's really caused a lot of problems for all the drivers on the class today, which really sucks to see. I was really hoping to see Tom come back and try and fight for the win.
Yeah, it's a tough one for Tom to take. That's the second big setback he's had this race, and some very slow traffic ahead in front as well. And there's a big incident there, almost as the predictability goes out the window, and Tom Lane almost gets caught up in it all, but manages to survive it quite nicely there. I think he knew what was about to happen. He backed out of that very early, knowing that this is just not the place to put your car at this moment in time. Maybe that's what happened to him earlier on as well with that 1:31 lap. He is running quicker now, but not quick enough, and looks like he's saying goodbye to that podium as we're down now to the business end of this race. 3 minutes to go.
And how close was Johnny Gutierrez, the leader in the GT3 Pro category, from being wiped out on the back straight? He had his heart in his mouth then, was so tight, especially when you consider that Sachin Sobers is not that far behind him. That could have been an absolute heartache with less than 5 minutes to go. So Tom Lane still trying to stay in touch with Brian Hall up in front of him in the Acura, but he's just not quite close enough, and he's still got some cars to negotiate. A penalty has come in there. Now, who got the penalty there? I think it was Timon Suvic. So Timon Suvic picking up a penalty in the closing stages, as if his race hadn't already gone from bad to worse. So Timon Suvic, who currently finds himself in 6th position, that's not gone well at all for him. So more problems. But we are still getting into the closing stages now, Stephen, and obviously there's going to be a lot of pressure on the drivers to finish this off in fine style. But it's amazing that the only driver that doesn't seem to have succumbed to all of the pressure is Wouter de Bruin.
He's certainly been doing a great job out there, but that pressure was mounting on him earlier on with Sellers, who was the only man who could really get close at the time, and then Sellers just overdriving the car a wee bit and ended up in trouble, and then got taken out entirely by another driver altogether, which relieved the pressure on Wouter by an immense amount. He's now got a 20-second gap to Wayne Hutchinson, and that Wayne Hutchinson has now a 10-second gap to the car behind as well. So it looks as though those guys just need to kind of keep things calm. They can kind of relax a little bit, take the pressure off. They don't need to drive even at 60% now of the cars. They didn't want to be anywhere near 100% at all because they had nothing to fight for. Ooh, bit of action there as a Hypercar had to dodge around. Wouter had to dodge around a GT3, if I can get my teeth put back in. They're in the fountain, which is not an easy place to make an overtake, so the red zone for a reason. But yeah, that's it's all gone his way. It has he almost got caught up in that major incident that almost took out all of the leaders in the first 10 minutes. But there's still time to go, and it's been a long race, and there are some very tired drivers out there right now. And this is the business where mistakes can happen. Your arms are tired, you're mentally tired. You've been doing this same thing for an hour, raced corner after corner, trying to dodge and dict traffic, and it's a huge mental toll as well as physical. And this is when the mistakes start to creep in, where you just kind of take your eye off the ball for a moment, miss your braking point, and before you know it, you're in the barrier.
This is where the experience really has paid dividends for Wouter de Bruin. He crosses the line with a few seconds in hand, and he now goes into the final lap here at Longbeach. A fabulous performance indeed it has been for Wouter de Bruin. Just when you think it's all going to fall away, his consistency, his smooth rhythm has been fantastic. A spin for Tom Lane! Tom Lane spins around! Well, that just is bad to worse for Tom Lane as he spin turns the car back again, and that really has summed up his entire race, hasn't it? Tom Lane will look back on Longbeach as missed opportunity. That he did it all on his own. That was all on his own, I'm afraid. So Tom Lane, the fastest man in qualifying, drops it, trying to get himself back into the positions again as Ross Smith tries to close up on Brian Hall. But the man up front has done the perfect job of staying out of trouble, making sure that the car is just about tickety-boo wherever it needs to be. And Wouter de Bruin is going to come through now to the final hairpin. It's been a fantastically calm and mature drive from the BMW driver. He comes off the final turn, down the home stretch, and what a victory. Wouter de Bruin takes the victory here at Longbeach in the 60 minutes. A brilliant performance from the rookie monster BMW driver. It'll be second place and the Hypercar AM victory for Wayne Hutchison, Stephen. That is glorious.
That is a sensational drive from Wayne there, you've got to say. And he does exactly what you need to do. We've been talking about it the entire race long. You've got to be calm, cool, smooth and predictable. And he's done that to great effect here. Getting himself up to P2 overall on the grid. He has absolutely smashed the rest of his class there. Unfortunately for him, he only gets the points for P1 in his class. So P2 still P2 regardless whether or not he's in P2 overall. But he's got to take great confidence from that, and he looks as though he's done that on merit. He has been quick lap after lap. He's got a 12.3 fastest lap compared to the 11.7, so only 0.6 behind these top guys. But it is the cleanliness of his racing that is made him reach those dizzying heights, and he's got to be extremely satisfied with that. Brian Hall rounds out the podium as well, and it's not gone well for Tom Lane today. It's a case of what if he had managed to get away and not get that penalty early on, then it could have been a very different race for him. I want to mention there for Gutierrez as well, who's won the GT3 class as well. He's had a very clean and predictable race as well. Almost got caught up in a drama or two, as did Wuta, as we saw early on, as he got pushed into the wall by John Yuan, who ended up out of the race in the end. Becky Eli wins the AM category as well, with another mature drive, as you described it earlier on. Very little to talk about her drive. Kept herself out of all of the trouble and all of the mayhem, and gets her just rewards for it in the end. Fantastic racing, though, all round.
We did say, didn't we, that qualifying was one thing and racing was quite another. Just getting pole position around Longbeach is not enough. You have to be all the way through at the finish. And what was that old Ron Dennis adage? To finish first, you have to finish. Wouter de Bruin takes the victory in front of Wayne Hutchison. Brian Hall in third position ahead of Ross Smith and Tom Lane. Missed opportunity. Jason Whitehead in sixth position in the Ferrari despite the shenanigans from earlier. George Angelidis in seventh place in front of John Uyan. And then it is Timon Suvic and Alexander Schultz that come through in the top 10. A fabulous, fabulous performance and a great result for Wouter de Bruin. And I tell you what, Alec, that race really did keep us on tenterhooks all the way throughout. That's exactly why the Long Beach Grand Prix Street Circuit is part of the calendar. It always throws up drama.
Yes, and this race was full of it. It seemed to be nothing but drama. So definitely was something special. We all can love Long Beach because it is just such an amazing circuit and provides us some great racing. So today was nothing short of that. It was a great race with some great battles, a lot of incidents that made it very exciting. And all in all, today was just a really good fight through everyone in the field.
Well, as we are waiting for the drivers to come into our broadcast booth, we will obviously grab them in one by one. We should start with our overall race winner, Wouter de Bruin, who did an absolutely fantastic job in the BMW hybrid from Rookie Monsters. Wouter was so smooth throughout. Wouter de Bruin, victory and a fantastic battle here at Long Beach. 60 minutes looked really, really hard work out there. You didn't stay out of the drama, but you did manage to keep it going to the end. Just sum up your thoughts after a tough old race out there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was an intense race. I mean, I got lucky at the start with the drive to that Tom Lane got, so that kind of paved the way for me. And I knew I had to fuel save a lot, but I could keep the cars about me, behind me. So yeah, the second stint, when I knew I would make them fuel and others didn't, or they took tires, I had quite a big gap. I just tried to concentrate on not hitting the wall, being safe with all the traffic, who behaved very nicely. And yeah, luckily we made it to the end.
And this obviously ultimately really changes things as far as the championship assault is concerned, because that is a big win at a time when some of your closest rivals really faltered at the critical moment.
Yeah, for sure this helps, but it's a long championship, so we'll see how it turns out late in the season. At the moment, I'm just concerned with doing the best I can at every round, and then we'll see how it ends up.
Fantastic. Stephen, a final question from you perhaps to our race winner, Wouter de Bruin?
Yeah, just obviously the pressure was on from Sellers. He's your teammate, and I imagine you're all in VC together with the community being so tight knit here. Did you know how quickly he was catching you, and what was going on with that? How much under pressure did you feel in those later stages, and how relieved were you when that pressure was released?
Yeah, we had no communication, so I wasn't exactly sure what his strategy was, but he pitted a couple laps earlier than me, so I was pretty sure he would not make it on fuel. But yeah, for most of the time I didn't realize that he was catching me, because I just turned off all the timing, concentrated on the race. I feel pretty confident that if I did not make any mistakes, I would make it. At one point I did see it was him behind me, but yeah, soon after he pitted, so I didn't really feel the pressure from that.
Terrific. Excellent work and a brilliant victory. Wouter de Bruin, the winner of the 60 minutes of Long Beach, California. Well done, buddy. Great job.
Thanks, guys.
Right, let's get our winner in the Hypercar AM category, the man who came home in second position overall, would you believe, after such a solid run. Wayne Hutchison, P2 overall, and the victory in Hypercar AM Your nearest challenger was 3 laps down, Wayne. I mean, that is the most emphatic way to win that race from your point of view.
Yeah, it was interesting. I knew that. I think it was Henrique. The guy, he was running second for a long time in Hypercar AM. I knew he was faster than I was, but he couldn't get by. And I was using a fuel save, tire save strategy, so I only had one stop the race. And as long as I kept him behind me, I knew I had him. And then everybody else, all the faster cars in the fast class had issues, so I ended up second overall.
Well, I've got to ask, because obviously we were watching that race and there were so many drivers from the front to the back that were hitting trouble and, basically bouncing off each other, bouncing off the walls and everything. Have you got reverse magnets on the side of your cars? Because nothing came near you all race, pretty much.
No, I wasn't close to anything. I saw, I had to pass a couple of stationary cars, but they were stationary and it was easy to get by them. It was just, I think it was just because of the way I was not attacking the corners. I was coasting into every corner, every braking zone. And so I had lots of time to react if something did go wrong. And it was just such a stress-free race, really.
You don't get them too often, so take them as they come. Stephen, final question for you for Wayne.
I mean, I'm amazed by the fact that you managed to have a stress-free race at Longbeach. It seems like a total misnomer. But that is your second win in the series, and it gives you a commanding hold over the top step in the AM category. But your rival here, Benchka, is hot on your heels, and Spa next time out. How are you feeling about that? That's obviously going to be a lot easier to navigate traffic at. There's still a couple of places where you can get caught up. Are you starting to kind of building confidence and feel confident that you can run away with this championship?
Yeah, I feel good about the championship. Spa, I'm not so sure. And everybody has raced a Spa so many times in their career, right? That everybody knows the track well. And you can get away with some things there that you can't get away at Longbeach. You can overdrive some corners there and survive. So, and that's not really my style. So I don't know that I'll win the Spa race, but I'll be competitive and, finish on the podium, I think.
Fantastic job. Absolutely brilliant race, Wayne, and a fantastic second place overall. Perfection. Well done.
Thank you.
Right. I think we've got time for one more interview before we wrap it up. And who better than to interview the GT AM winner, who was so close actually to the GT overall winner, having done another fantastic job. Becky Ely. Another solid run at Longbeach of all places as well. We've just been speaking to Wayne Hutchison, who kind of had nothing really come near him all race long. It was a pretty similar story for you, Becky. We didn't really get to see much of you until the closing stages because you just seemed to have a seamless race. I'll bet it wasn't as easy as you made it look.
It was absolute carnage. mental race. Like, my car was in pretty nasty condition by the end. I made 2 massive mistakes. I thought I qualified first in the AMS. Just follow JT. He's pro. He's going fast. So stay in his slipstream. I'll just follow him the whole time. Then he went down an escape road. What do? I follow him down the escape road. So then I drop behind pretty much all of the AMS and have to work my way through again. Then I do it again at the first corner. Have to 3-point turn my way out. And meanwhile, the hypercars were it was insane sometimes. Like, they cut across the node, just like slam into the side of me. I mean, they're pushing like crazy. It happens. It's racing. It's only a game. I'm sure it happens in real life too. Like, but just don't repair your car. Just drive with it. And then I couldn't afford to change tires. But yeah, it's absolutely mad race. All the incidents. At one point, I slammed into the back of a hypercar where they'd all stopped at the fountain, and I was following them and I couldn't brake in time, so just smash into the back. It was, absolute carnage, that race. Not a clean one at all, but mega fun.
I can imagine so. And considering what this does now for your championship aspirations, obviously taking a second win out of 4, I mean, it's very early doors still, but considering how you were able to make it back and the pace that you've got with the Acura, is this now starting to potentially ring a possible bell of a championship contention, or is it still really early days to be thinking about that?
Way too early days to be thinking about that. I mean, who knows? Like, if my pace improves at all, I'll get promoted to pro, and then there's no championship. So there's no point really thinking about that anytime soon. Plus, I hate Le Mans, and that's like worth 4 times the points or something. So that it's all going to fall apart there anyway.
Okay, well, we're glad that it hasn't fallen apart here, and considering how tough it was, great to see you up at the top spot. Stephen, a final question for our GT3 AM winner, Becky Ely.
I think we covered most of it, but yeah, I just want to say what a change in fortunes there between you and Wayne. Wayne said he had a very relaxing race, and you've come on after looking as though it was all wrapped up and sewn up quite easily, kind of thing, saying that it was, you feel like you've gone 12 rounds with Mike Tyson or something like that. So yeah, but like it must be excited for Spa. Surely Spa's a track that everybody knows quite well, and it makes it a little easier for multi-class racing for sure. What are your thoughts on that, and how are you feeling about that one? Because if Le Mans is poor and it's a couple of weeks away, though, you got to think about the next race only.
Yeah, Spa is an epic track, and the Hypercars will be something to behold there for sure. And they should be able to get past us really easily. The only problem will be if they get caught up behind us in one of the technical sections and get a bit frustrated. But otherwise, it should be really good. And I reckon it's going to suit the Acura really well as well, because it goes so well, that thing. It's a really great car.
Fantastic. What a brilliant end to the race for you then, Becky, the winner in the GT3 AM category. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we've had thrills and spills all the way. We'll wrap up with closing remarks. Alec King, it's been a very complicated one, a very complex one, but just as you said at the beginning, it all comes down to discipline, and it was really telling to see who was able to keep their cool and who hit trouble.
Yes, this race was definitely all about how could you manage yourself. Not even really, I mean, yes, the car, but manage yourself. What predicaments can you put yourself in and try and stay out of? So definitely was really challenging, but this race was a great race. Longbeach always puts on the track always allows us to have a really great race with some good battles. We had a lot of incidents, which made it kind of exciting, but all in all today was just a really good racing product that we had here, and I bet we all can find it very enjoyable.
Absolutely. And Stephen Carabellis, final word from you. You mentioned obviously the next round of the championship being Spa. It's going to be a bit of a relief for a lot of the drivers to actually have some runoff to play with if things go wrong. But I tell you what, the challenge of Spa 24 hour, the Spa Francorchamps circuit cannot be underestimated.
Certainly not. No, obviously these street tracks are always difficult because the walls and damage is so close away. But with Spa comes a different set of challenges. You've got the difference in speed is a lot more marked there with the long straights and the heavy braking zones. And although it might be a little bit easier for in terms of multi-class racing, it doesn't make it impossible to hit somebody else in the wrong class. Those that bus stop, for example, at the very end of that straight there, it's very easy to get a bit of a send there. And Eau Rouge is infamous for its incidents, and you can definitely end up out of the race. The other side of it, as well as that, obviously drivers know that Longbeach, you're only a centimetre away from a deadly wall at any stage, whereas at Spa, you feel as though you lull yourself into a false sense of security at times. Be thinking that, well, I've got loads of runoff, I can play with that, and then all of a sudden you're sliding backwards at 150 miles an hour into that barrier, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that overconfidence is going to come into play next week for sure. There's a lot of people who know that track very well as well. So like Wayne said earlier, it's a lot easier to overdrive the car in places there, whereas here at Longbeach, you've got to be very on the ball all of the time. It's easier to switch off at Spa for sure. But I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here watching this race. It was an eventful and exciting race with some great overtakes involved as well, which is what we come here for, really. It's what we're all here for. And this
certainly was. Thrilling chapter in the Virtual World Sportscar Championship 2023 campaign, and Longbeach definitely delivered in spades. Tom Lane may have been the fastest man in qualifying, but the coolest customer was Wouter de Bruin. And as we head to Spa, a lot of things to talk about going into round 5. From all of us here, from Champion Motorsports, from the guys at Storm Gang Simulation, from myself, Jake Sanson, and my colleagues Stephen Carabellis and Alec King, and from James Parfitt Broadcasting and the whole team that have been working behind the scenes to bring you the coverage, thank you very much indeed for being with us. We'll see you again next time in VWSC. Bye for now.